My hands trembled as I folded the last of my clothes into the duffel bag. Not from cold, though the January morning bit through the thin walls of Miller House like it had a personal grudge. Not from fear, exactly. More like the feeling you get standing at the edge of something tall, knowing you're about to jump and hoping there's water below instead of rocks. The duffel bag was green canvas, military surplus, bought at a thrift store 3 years ago when I'd moved from the juvenile facility back into the group home system. Everything I owned fit inside it. 2 pairs of jeans, 4 shirts, underwear and socks that had been washed so many times the elastic barely remembered its job, a jacket that stopped being waterproof sometime during the Obama administration, one photograph in a frame I'd wrapped in a towel so the glass wouldn't break. The photograph showed 2 people I barely remembered, a man with dark hair and a work shirt, sleeves rolled to his elbows, a woman with her hair pulled back, smiling at the camera like she knew a secret. They stood in front of a log cabin with mountains rising behind them, purple in the distance. My father had his arm around my mother's waist. They looked young. They looked happy. They looked like they had no idea they had less than 6 months to live. I was 21 years old on that Tuesday morning, which meant the state of Wyoming had officially run out of excuses to keep me. The foster care system doesn't believe in extended stays. When you hit 21, you're out, ready or not. I wasn't ready. Mrs. Alvarez knocked on my door at exactly 8 o'clock. She was my case worker, a tired woman in her 40s who'd seen too many kids like me pass through her files. I didn't blame her for the weariness in her eyes. This job would grind anyone down to nothing. She held a certified letter in her hands, thick cream-colored paper, the expensive kind that feels important when you touch it. The return address said Elliot Price, attorney at law from a town called Riverton that I'd never heard of. "Morgan," she said, "we need to talk before you leave." I followed her down the hallway one last time, past the rooms where younger kids were still sleeping, still years away from their own expulsion date, past the common area where I'd spent 1,000 hours staring at a television without really watching it, past the cafeteria where I'd eaten meals that all tasted like variations on the same theme of institutional giving up. In her office, Mrs. Alvarez settled behind her desk and opened the envelope. She read it first, her eyebrows climbing higher with each paragraph. Then she looked at me with something I'd never seen in her face before, something that might have been hope, or maybe just surprise that the universe had remembered I existed. "Morgan," she said slowly, "you've inherited property." The words didn't make sense at first. People like me didn't inherit things. We inherited bad luck and low expectations, and the kind of damage that follows you around like a faithful dog. We didn't inherit property. "Your maternal grandmother," Mrs. Alvarez continued, "Ruth Dalton, she passed away 3 months ago." I felt something cold move through my chest. My grandmother. I had a grandmother. Somewhere in the back of my mind, I'd known that technically, genetically, I must have had grandparents. But they'd never been real to me. Just theoretical people who existed in the same way that planets exist, out there somewhere but not part of my world. "She left you a ranch," Mrs. Alvarez said, 120 acres in Fremont County, a house, some outbuildings, and a bank account with $18,000. $18,000. I had $47 in my pocket. I had never possessed more than a few hundred at once in my entire life. 18,000 might as well have been 18 million. Mrs. Alvarez handed me the letter. I read it twice before the words started to penetrate. Legal language about estates and probate and beneficiaries. But underneath the lawyer speak, the message was simple. A woman I'd never known had died and left me everything she had. "I don't understand," I said. "Why didn't she ever contact me?" Mrs. Alvarez pulled another document from her files. This one was old, yellowed at the edges, dated 14 years ago. A letter from Child Protective Services to Ruth Dalton, requesting she take custody of her granddaughter following the deaths of the child's parents. Ruth's response was handwritten on lined paper, the letters formed with visible effort by hands that weren't used to writing. I cannot take the child. I am 65 years old with declining health. I live alone on a remote property with no support system. The forge is no place for a child. She would burn. I read it 3 times. Each time the words cut a little deeper. The forge is no place for a child. She would burn. What did that mean? What forge? And why phrase it that way, like burning was inevitable, like I was made of something flammable? Mrs. Alvarez was watching me carefully. Morgan, I know this is a lot to process, but this could change everything for you. A fresh start, property, financial stability. Could it? I wasn't sure I believed in fresh starts. In my experience, you took your damage with you wherever you went. Geography didn't fix what was broken inside. But still, a ranch, 120 acres, a grandmother who'd rejected me 14 years ago but had apparently thought about me at the end. Why leave me anything after all this time? If she didn't want me when I was 7 years old and terrified and alone, why did she want me to have her property now? I called the number on the letterhead from the payphone outside Miller House. My cell phone had died 2 months ago, and I hadn't had money to replace it. The phone rang 4 times before a man answered. Price and Associates, this is Elliot. His voice was warm, professional, the voice of someone who'd spent decades delivering both good news and bad with equal measures of dignity. This is Morgan Tate, I said. I received a letter about my grandmother's estate. Miss Tate, he said, and I could hear the smile in his voice. I've been hoping you'd call. I'm very sorry for your loss. My loss, as if I'd lost something, as if you could lose someone you'd never really had. Your grandmother was very specific in her instructions, he continued. She wanted you to have the ranch, the forge, everything. She also left materials for you that I'm required to give you in person. When can you come to Riverton? It's about 4 hours from Laramie by bus. When could I come? I had nowhere else to be. No job waiting, no apartment lined up, no life to return to. The transitional housing program had a waiting list 3 months long. As soon as I can get there, I said. I used some of my $47 to buy a Greyhound ticket. The bus left at noon, winding through a landscape that got more empty with every mile. Laramie gave way to smaller towns, then to stretches of nothing punctuated by the occasional ranch house or gas station. The sky was huge out here, bigger than I'd ever seen it, pressing down on the earth like it was trying to flatten everything into submission. The other passengers were a mix of tired travelers and people who looked like they were running from something. I fit right in. I sat near the back and watched Wyoming slide by through a scratched window. I thought about my mother. Her name was Rebecca. Rebecca Rose Dalton before she married. She'd grown up on that ranch I was inheriting. She'd walked those 120 acres. She'd known my grandmother in ways I never would. What had made her leave? The lawyer's letter mentioned she'd been estranged from Ruth for years before the accident. Why? What could drive a daughter away from her mother so completely? I pulled out the photograph and studied it again. That cabin in the background. Was that the ranch? Was I looking at the place I was about to inherit without even knowing it? My mother's face gave me no answers. She just smiled at the camera, young and beautiful and completely unaware that she had less than 7 years left to live. I fell asleep somewhere past Rawlins and woke up as we pulled into Riverton. The town was small, the kind of place where everyone probably knew everyone else's business. Main Street had the usual suspects: feed store, hardware store, diner with a flickering neon sign, a few bars, a library that looked like it had been built during the Depression and hadn't been updated since. The law office was in a converted house on a side street, white paint peeling around the windows, a wooden sign hanging from the porch that said price, and associates in letters that had faded to gray. Elliot Price met me at the door. He was maybe 70, with white hair and the kind of weathered face that comes from a lifetime in high-altitude sun. His eyes were kind. He looked like the kind of grandfather I used to imagine having back when I still let myself imagine such things. "Miss Tate," he said, shaking my hand. "Morgan, thank you for coming all this way." He led me to his office and settled me into a worn leather chair. Then he pulled out a sealed envelope with my name written across the front in shaky handwriting. Each letter looked like it had been formed with great effort. "Your grandmother wrote this 2 weeks before she died," he said. "She was very specific that you should read it before seeing the property." I opened it carefully. Inside was a letter on lined paper, the same handwriting as the custody refusal from 14 years ago. But this handwriting was worse, shakier, like the hand holding the pen had been fighting against pain or exhaustion. "My dearest Morgan," it began. Not Morgan Tate, not Miss Tate, my dearest Morgan. "I imagine you're confused, probably angry too. You have every right to those feelings. I won't insult you by asking for forgiveness. I'm not sure I deserve it. What I can offer you is an explanation, and I hope, a chance at the life your mother would have wanted for you. Your mother and I were estranged before the accident, a falling out that festered for years over choices and stubbornness. I take the blame. Pride, the kind that masquerades as principle until it's too late to tell the difference. When social services contacted me about taking you in, I wanted desperately to say yes. But I was 65 years old, living alone on a remote ranch with rheumatoid arthritis already making it hard to work. I could barely take care of myself. I convinced myself it was selfless, that you deserved better than an elderly grandmother in the middle of nowhere. I told myself the system would find you a good family. I was wrong. I was a coward, and I've spent every day since then regretting the choice I made. I couldn't take you in, but I never stopped thinking about you. I contacted social services regularly, requesting updates. I hired private investigators to find you when the system stopped sharing information. I set aside money every year. I planned obsessively for the day you would age out. The ranch is your inheritance. It's been in our family for 4 generations. Do with it as you wish. But if you want to keep it, everything you need to get started is waiting for you. There's something you should know. The forge is not what it seems. Everything important is hidden in the iron. Learn to read it and you'll understand. Be careful, Morgan. Not everyone can be trusted. But Wade Keller is a good man. He was my friend for 30 years. Trust him. I'm sorry I wasn't brave enough to be the grandmother you deserved. But I hope this ranch can give you the foundation I failed to provide. I love you, Morgan. I've always loved you, even when I couldn't find the courage to show it. Ruth Dalton. I sat in that leather chair for a long time, staring at the words. All those years of feeling unwanted. All those nights wondering what was wrong with me. And she'd been thinking about me the whole time. It didn't erase the loneliness. It didn't give me back the childhood I'd lost. But something shifted inside me, like a door I'd kept locked for 14 years had just opened a crack. Elliot Price was watching me with patient eyes. He'd probably seen this scene before. The stunned beneficiary trying to reconcile the past with the present. "There's someone waiting to meet you," he said gently. "Wade Keller. He's offered to drive you out to the property." Wade Keller turned out to be a tall man in his 60s, weathered like old leather, with kind eyes and hands that looked like they'd spent a lifetime working. He drove a mud-spattered Ford F-250 that smelled like hay and diesel, and something I couldn't identify, but that felt like it belonged to this landscape. "Your grandmother talked about you all the time," he said as we drove out of Riverton, especially toward the end. "What was she like?" I asked. He was quiet for a moment, choosing his words. "Stubborn as stone, brilliant, generous in ways most people never knew about, and haunted, always haunted by the choices she'd made." The road got narrower as we drove, pavement giving way to gravel. Stone fences lined some of the fields, old enough that they looked like they'd grown out of the earth itself. The mountains rose in the distance, the Wind River Range cutting across the horizon like broken teeth. We turned onto a dirt road marked by a weathered wooden sign, "Dalton Ranch, S. 1954. 1954. 70 years of my family's history rooted in this one piece of land. The main house came into view first. It was a low ranch-style building, log construction with a metal roof. The logs had weathered to silver gray. Some of the chinking between them had cracked and fallen away. A few windows had been covered with plywood. The porch sagged on one side. But even in its current state, there was something solid about it, something that spoke of endurance. "Needs work," Wade said, "but the structure's sound. New roof 10 years ago. Well is deep and clean. Septic system was replaced 5 years back." Behind the house stood a barn, red paint faded to rust. Several smaller outbuildings scattered around the property, corrals with good fencing, and beyond them fields stretched toward the tree line. 120 acres. In the city, you measured your space in square feet. Here, it seemed to go on forever. Wade drove past the house, following a track that led to the largest outbuilding. It was built of stone, not wood. Heavy construction with a metal roof and a chimney rising from one end. "The forge," Wade said. He parked and we got out. The wind hit me immediately, cold and constant, carrying the smell of sage and snow. I followed Wade to a heavy wooden door. He produced a key from his pocket and handed it to me. "Your grandmother wanted you to open it yourself," he said. The key was iron, hand-forged, heavier than any key I'd ever held. It fit into a lock that looked like it had been made by the same hand that made the key. I turned it. Something inside the door clicked. I pushed. The door swung open on hinges that didn't squeak. What I saw inside stopped me dead. I'd expected farming equipment, old tools, dust and cobwebs and forgotten things. What I found instead took my breath away. The interior was one large room, maybe 40 feet by 30. The walls were stone, thick enough to hold back the Wyoming winter. But it was what filled the space that made my heart forget how to beat. This wasn't a storage building. This was a workshop, a forge in the old sense of the word, a place where metal was heated and shaped and transformed. Against the far wall stood the forge itself, a massive structure of brick and iron with a chimney rising through the roof. The forge bed was maybe 3 feet across, filled with coal that still held a faint warmth, as if someone had been here recently. Above it, a hood to capture smoke. Beside it, a hand-crank blower for forcing air. The floor was concrete, stained black in places from years of scale and coal dust. In the center of the room sat an anvil, not a small decorative thing, but a working anvil, maybe 200 pounds of solid steel on a massive wooden stump. The face of the anvil was worn smooth from countless hammer strikes. But there wasn't just one anvil. There were 6 of them, arranged around the room at different stations. Different sizes, different shapes, each one showing the wear of decades of use. The walls were lined with tools. Hammers of every size hung on racks, organized by weight, tongs in dozens of configurations, chisels and punches and drifts, files and rasps and grinding wheels. Everything had its place, everything labeled, everything maintained with obsessive precision. And along one wall, on wooden stands, sat finished pieces. I walked over slowly, afraid to breathe too hard, afraid to disturb something sacred. There were gates, ornamental ironwork gates that would have looked at home in front of a mansion. The metalwork was intricate, flowing patterns that seemed to move in the light. Each one must have taken months to make. There were tools, not hardware store tools but custom pieces. Farrier tools for shoeing horses, each one forged and shaped and polished until it was as much art as implement. There were decorative pieces, chandeliers, fireplace screens, candle holders, wall sconces. Each one showed a level of skill that seemed impossible. And there were sculptures, abstract pieces, some recognizable as animals or plants, others pure form and movement. Metal that had been convinced to flow like water, to twist like flame, to suggest life in iron. Your grandmother was one of the finest blacksmiths in Wyoming, Wade said quietly from behind me. Self-taught. Started after your grandfather died as a way to cope. Turned out she had a real gift. I reached out and touched one of the gates. The metal was cold under my fingers, smooth where it had been filed and polished, slightly rough where it had been left with hammer marks. The work was museum quality. This wasn't just skill. This was artistry. She sold to galleries and collectors all over the West, Wade continued. That's how she supported herself. Every piece you see here she made with those hands. Some of them took 6 months. Some took a year. I couldn't speak. My grandmother had built all of this, had learned a trade that most people never even knew existed anymore, had mastered it to a level that made her legendary, and I'd never known, never even suspected. Wade led me to a smaller room at the back of the forge. Inside was a desk, a filing cabinet, and a laptop computer that looked incongruous among all the hand tools and coal dust. She left you videos, Wade said, 68 of them, tutorials. She started making them about 15 years ago, said she wanted to pass on what she'd learned even if she never got to teach you in person. He opened the laptop and powered it on. The desktop wallpaper was a photograph of a younger woman working at an anvil, hammer raised, face intent. My grandmother, maybe 20 years ago, strong, focused, alive. Wade opened a folder labeled for Morgan. Inside were 68 video files, each one numbered and dated. He clicked on number 1. The video opened with my grandmother's face. She was younger in this recording, maybe early 60s. Her hair was gray, pulled back from her face. Her eyes were the same gray as mine. Her hands, resting on the workbench in front of her, were gnarled with arthritis but still strong. She looked directly at the camera and spoke. "I'm Ruth Dalton. If you're watching this, you're my granddaughter Morgan and I'm gone. I'm sorry I never got to teach you this in person. I'm sorry for a lot of things, but I can teach you this way and maybe that's better than nothing." Her voice was rougher than I'd expected, worn from years of breathing coal smoke and forge heat. "I'm going to teach you blacksmithing, the old way, the way it's been done for thousands of years. Fire and iron and hammer, it's hard work. It'll break you if you let it, but if you stick with it, you'll make things that outlast you, and that's worth something." She picked up a hammer, weighing it in her hand. "First lesson, the hammer is an extension of your arm. The anvil is your foundation. The fire is your teacher. Iron doesn't lie. It'll show you every mistake you make. Can't erase mistakes in iron. Can only start over." She paused, looking directly into the camera, directly at me across time and death. I hope you'll give this a chance, Morgan. I hope you'll learn what I'm trying to teach you. Not just about metalwork, about patience, about persistence, about making something beautiful from something raw. The video ended. I sat staring at the frozen image of my grandmother's face. She'd recorded this 15 years ago, when I was 6 years old, living in my third or fourth foster home, and she'd been thinking about me, planning for this moment. Wade cleared his throat. There's something else you should see. He led me back into the main forge area, to a corner I hadn't examined yet. There was a heavy wooden workbench with a vise mounted on one end, and underneath the bench, partially hidden, was an iron box. It was about 2 feet long, a foot wide, maybe 8 inches deep, hand-forged from what looked like quarter-inch plate steel. The lid was decorated with hammer marks arranged in a pattern, and on the top, welded in 3-inch letters made of round stock, were my initials. M.E.T. Morgan Elizabeth Tate. I knelt beside it. There was no visible lock, no keyhole, no hinge. The lid and body appeared to be a single piece, welded seamlessly together, but it couldn't be. There had to be a way in. I ran my fingers along the seam between lid and body. Nothing. I looked for a hidden latch, a concealed mechanism. Nothing. She worked on that for months, Wade said. Wouldn't tell me what was inside. Just said it was the most important thing she had to give you, and that you'd find the way in when you were ready. When I was ready, what did that mean? Ready for what? On the side of the box, stamped into the metal with what must have been custom-made dies, was a short inscription. Open when you can read the iron. Read the iron. I didn't know what that meant. I didn't know what any of this meant. Wade must have seen the exhaustion on my face. Come on, he said gently. Let's get you settled in the house. You can come back to the forge tomorrow. That night, Wade and his wife June fed me the first real meal I'd had in as long as I could remember. Pot roast with carrots and potatoes. Bread that June had baked that morning. Coffee that didn't taste like it had been made from grounds that had been used 3 times already. Their house was warm and comfortable, filled with the kind of worn furniture that comes from decades of use by people who actually like each other. Pictures on the walls of children and grandchildren. A life that had been built slowly, with care. Over dinner, June told me about my grandmother. How Ruth had helped their family when Wade had been injured and couldn't work. How she'd paid for their daughter's dental work when they couldn't afford it. How she'd never made it feel like charity, always found a way to frame it as something else. Your grandmother was private, June said. Didn't let people close easily. But once she decided you were worth caring about, she'd move mountains for you. Wade added something that made me set down my fork. Ruth changed the last couple of years, got more cautious, stopped taking commissions, wouldn't go to town much. Why, I asked. Wade and June exchanged a glance. The kind of look that passes between married people who have learned to communicate without words. There was a man, Wade said finally, Marcus Webb. He used to be Ruth's apprentice years back. They had a falling out. He wanted to learn techniques she wouldn't teach him. Started his own forge about 20 miles from here. Was he bothering her? Wade hesitated. I think he might have been. She never said directly. But I'd see his truck on the road sometimes, heading toward your grandmother's place. And she'd mention him in ways that made me think he was pressuring her about something. What techniques? Damascus steel, June said. It's a way of layering different types of metal to create patterns. Your grandmother was one of the few people who still knew how to do it the traditional way. It's a family secret, passed down through generations. And this Marcus wanted to learn it. Wanted her to teach him, Wade said. or wanted her to sell him pieces he could study. She refused. After dinner, they put me in their guest room. It was a small room with a quilt on the bed and curtains that smelled like lavender. Through the window, I could see the silhouette of my grandmother's ranch about half a mile away. The forge building was just visible against the darkening sky. I should have been exhausted, should have fallen asleep immediately. But I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, my mind spinning through everything I'd learned. My grandmother had loved me from a distance, had tracked me through the system, had built a workshop full of tools and knowledge and beauty, had left me everything. But she'd also left me questions. What was in the iron box? What did it mean to read the iron? Who was Marcus Webb, and why had my grandmother refused to teach him? And why did Wade sound worried when he talked about him? At 2 in the morning, I got out of bed and went to the window. I don't know what made me look. Maybe just restlessness. Maybe instinct. The forge building was dark, or it should have been. But as I watched, I saw a light move inside, a flashlight beam sweeping back and forth through the darkness. Someone was in my grandmother's workshop in the middle of the night. I stood at that window for 20 minutes, watching the light move. My heart hammered against my ribs. I wanted to run over there to confront whoever was trespassing. But I was alone in a strange place with no phone, no weapon, no idea what I was dealing with. The light disappeared around 2:30. I didn't sleep for the rest of the night. In the morning, I told Wade I wanted to check on the forge before breakfast. He offered to come, but something told me to go alone first. The forge doors were still locked, exactly as we'd left them. Nothing looked disturbed from the outside, but when I walked around to the back of the building, I found what I was looking for. Footprints in the mud, fresh ones, large, heavy boots. The prints led right up to a small door I hadn't noticed before, a secondary entrance on the back wall. Someone had been here. Someone had been searching for something. I tried the back door. It was unlocked. Inside, everything looked the same as yesterday. The anvils in their places, the tools on their racks, but something felt different, like the air itself knew it had been disturbed. I walked slowly through the space, looking for anything out of place. It took me 10 minutes to find it. One of the filing cabinets in the back room was open, just slightly, maybe an inch, and the files inside had been moved. I could tell because my grandmother had organized them with the same obsessive precision she'd used for her tools. Alphabetical with dividers, everything labeled, but now the dividers were slightly askew. Someone had been going through my grandmother's records. I was about to leave when I noticed something else. On the floor near the main forge, half hidden under a workbench, was a small piece of paper. I picked it up. It was a receipt from Riverton Welding Supply, dated 3 days before my grandmother died. The item purchased was listed as 1 spool of MIG welding wire, 0.035-inch diameter. The name on the receipt was M. Webb. I stood there holding that receipt, my mind trying to make sense of what it meant. My grandmother had been a traditional blacksmith. She used forge welding, not modern welding equipment. She wouldn't have bought MIG wire. But someone named M. Webb had bought it 3 days before she died. Marcus Webb, Wade's story from last night, the apprentice who'd wanted techniques my grandmother wouldn't teach. I pulled out my grandmother's death certificate, which Elliot Price had included in the estate documents. Cause of death: accidental carbon monoxide poisoning, found deceased in forge building. Carbon monoxide buildup from blocked ventilation system. Blocked ventilation system. I looked up at the chimney that rose from the main forge, followed it with my eyes to where it exited through the roof. Then I walked outside and examined the exhaust pipe where it emerged from the building. The pipe was about 8 inches in diameter, rising 10 feet above the roofline. And around the opening, I could see something that made my blood go cold. Fresh welding marks, modern welding, the kind that leaves a slightly different texture than forge welding. Someone had welded a cap over the exhaust pipe, not completely sealed but restricted, enough to cause carbon monoxide to back up into the building. Enough to kill someone working inside. I climbed back down and went into the forge's back room, found my grandmother's journal, the one I'd glimpsed yesterday, opened it to the last entry, dated the day before she died. MW came again today, threatened me, said accidents happen in forges all the time, that I should be more careful. I told him to leave and never come back. If anything happens to me, it's not an accident. Check the vents. He bought welding supplies in town. I saw the receipt in his truck. I'm documenting this as insurance. Morgan, if you're reading this, find the 7th anvil. It holds the truth about everything. My hands were shaking. I read the entry 3 more times, but the words didn't change. My grandmother hadn't died in an accident. Someone had murdered her, had sealed the ventilation system so carbon monoxide would build up while she worked, had made it look like an equipment failure. Marcus Webb, the apprentice who wanted her secrets. I looked around the forge at the 6 anvils arranged throughout the space, counted them again to be sure. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6 anvils, but my grandmother's note mentioned a 7th. Find the 7th anvil. It holds the truth about everything. I searched the forge for an hour looking for something I'd missed. A hidden anvil, a secret compartment, anything. I found nothing. The 7th anvil wasn't in the forge. Or maybe it was. Maybe it was hidden in a way I didn't understand yet. Maybe that's what my grandmother meant by learning to read the iron. I stood in the center of the workshop, surrounded by tools and metal, and the ghost of a woman I'd never known but who'd loved me from a distance for 14 years. A woman who'd been murdered. A woman who'd left me clues in iron and cryptic notes, trusting that I'd be smart enough to find the truth. I wasn't sure I was smart enough. I wasn't sure I was anything enough. But I was all she had. The morning sun slanted through the high windows, catching on metal and throwing shadows across the concrete floor. Somewhere in this building was a 7th anvil. Somewhere in that anvil was the truth about my grandmother's death. I just had to learn to read the iron. I just had to become someone worthy of the legacy she'd left me. I just had to make sure whoever had killed her didn't kill me too. The sheriff's office sat on Main Street between a hardware store and a diner that smelled like bacon grease even from across the road. The building was brick, single-story, with a flagpole out front and bars on the windows that looked like they'd been installed sometime during the Carter administration. I pushed through the door at 9 in the morning, carrying my grandmother's journal and the death certificate and the welding receipt that had M. Webb's name on it. The woman at the front desk looked up from her computer. She was maybe 50, with gray hair pulled back tight and reading glasses on a chain around her neck. Her nameplate said dispatch. "I need to see Sheriff Harper," I said. She looked me over, taking in my thrift store jacket and the duffel bag I was still carrying because I hadn't figured out where else to put it. "Do you have an appointment?" "No, but I have evidence of a murder." That got her attention. She picked up her phone and spoke quietly into it. 2 minutes later, a man emerged from the back hallway. Sheriff Luke Harper was maybe 55, built solid like someone who'd spent his youth doing physical work and his middle age sitting behind a desk wishing he still could. He had a thick mustache and eyes that looked tired in the way that comes from seeing too much of what people do to each other. "Miss Tate, I heard you were in town. Come on back." His office was small and cluttered. File boxes stacked in corners, a desk buried under paperwork, a bulletin board covered with wanted posters and community announcements, a coffee maker that looked like it had been making the same pot of coffee since 1998. He gestured to a chair across from his desk. I sat, placed the journal and the death certificate and the receipt in front of him. "My grandmother didn't die in an accident," I said. "Someone murdered her." He picked up the death certificate first. Read it slowly. Then he looked at me with something that might have been sympathy or might have been the professional patience of a man who'd dealt with grieving family members before. "Miss Tate, I know this is hard, but your grandmother was 79 years old. Carbon monoxide accidents happen in forge buildings. The ventilation system was old. These things happen." I pulled out my phone and showed him the photos I'd taken that morning of the welded exhaust pipe, the fresh welds, the modern technique. "That's not old equipment failure," I said. "Someone sealed the vent, made it look like an accident." Sheriff Harper studied the photos. His expression didn't change much, but something shifted behind his eyes. "Could be a repair someone did," he said. "Not necessarily sinister." I opened the journal to the last entry, slid it across the desk. He read it again, then sat back in his chair. "Marcus Webb," he said quietly. "You know him." "Everyone knows Marcus. He runs a forge about 20 miles from here, does farrier work, some custom iron work. He was your grandmother's apprentice years back. And my grandmother wrote that he threatened her the day before she died." Sheriff Harper was quiet for a long moment. Then he said something that made my stomach tighten. "Morgan, I'm going to be straight with you. Marcus Webb is a respected member of this community. He's shod horses for half the ranchers in Fremont County. He sponsors the Little League team. He's on the volunteer fire department. So I can't just arrest him because your grandmother wrote something in a journal. I need more than that. I need witnesses, physical evidence, a case that'll hold up. You have the welding receipt. You have the vents that were sealed. You have her written statement that he threatened her. I have a receipt that says someone named M. Webb bought welding wire. Could be anyone with those initials. I have vents that could have been repaired by anyone. And I have a journal entry that's hearsay, not admissible in court. So you're not going to do anything." He leaned forward. "I didn't say that. I'm saying I need to investigate properly, talk to people, build a case. But I need you to understand something. If Marcus Webb did this, he's been covering his tracks for 3 months. He's not going to confess just because I ask him nicely." "Then what do I do?" Sheriff Harper looked at me for a long time. Then he said, "You be careful. You don't go confronting him yourself. You let me handle this. And you watch your back, because if he killed once, he might kill again." I left the sheriff's office with a sick feeling in my stomach. I'd expected justice. I'd expected action. Instead, I got caution and procedure, and the slow grinding wheels of a system that seemed more interested in protecting the community's comfort than finding the truth. Wade was waiting outside in his truck. I'd asked him to drive me into town. Now I climbed in and sat silent for a minute, trying to swallow my frustration. "No good?" he asked. "He's not going to do anything. Says he needs more evidence." Wade nodded like he'd expected this. "Luke's a good man, but he's careful, won't move unless he's sure." "My grandmother is dead. Someone killed her. How much more sure does he need to be?" Wade started the truck and pulled into traffic. In a small town, careful is survival. Everyone knows everyone. You accuse the wrong person, you destroy lives, families, businesses. Luke won't do that without being certain. We drove in silence for a few minutes. Then Wade said something that changed everything. "You want to talk to Marcus yourself." I thought the sheriff said not to confront him. I said talk to him, not confront. There's a difference. Marcus is a complicated man. Maybe you should hear his side before you decide he's a killer. Why would you help me do that if you think he killed my grandmother? Wade's hands tightened on the steering wheel. Because I've known Marcus for 20 years, and I can't make myself believe he'd do it, but I also knew your grandmother, and I can't make myself believe she'd lie. So maybe the truth is somewhere in between. Maybe you need to see for yourself. Where is he? His forge, about 20 miles west. I can take you there now if you want. I wanted. I wanted to look this man in the eyes and see if he was capable of murder. I wanted answers more than I wanted caution. We drove west out of Riverton on a 2-lane highway that cut through land that looked like God had gotten tired halfway through making it. Scrub brush and red rock and distant mountains that still had snow on their peaks even though it was late January. The sky was so big it made me feel small, like an insect crawling across the palm of something vast and indifferent. Webb Forge was marked by a hand-painted sign at the end of a gravel drive. The property was smaller than my grandmother's, maybe 20 acres. A small house, a barn, and a low metal building with smoke coming from a chimney. Wade parked near the metal building. We could hear the ring of hammer on anvil before we got out of the truck. Steady, rhythmic, the sound of someone who'd spent decades perfecting a motion. The door was open. We stepped inside. The forge was maybe a third the size of my grandmother's. The equipment was older, some of it showing rust and wear. But it was clean, organized, functional. And at the main anvil stood a man who had to be Marcus Webb. He was maybe 62, but built like someone 20 years younger. Broad shoulders, thick arms, hands that looked like they could bend steel without heating it first. His hair was gray, cut short. His face was weathered, lined deep around the eyes. He wore a leather apron over a work shirt, and his hands were wrapped in cloth to protect against the heat. He was working on a horseshoe, heating it in the forge until it glowed orange, then bringing it to the anvil and striking it with precise, measured blows. Each strike rang out clear and true. The metal moved under his hammer, taking shape, becoming something useful. He saw us but didn't stop working. Finished the shoe, examined it, nodded once, then set it aside to cool. Only then did he look at us directly. "Wade," he said. His voice was deep, rough from years of breathing forge smoke. Marcus Wade said, "This is Morgan Tate, Ruth's granddaughter." Marcus Webb looked at me, really looked at me, and I saw something in his eyes that I hadn't expected. Not guilt, not fear, sadness, deep and old and carried like a weight he'd gotten used to. "So you're Ruth's granddaughter," he said. "She talked about you." "Did she?" My voice came out harder than I'd intended. "All the time, especially toward the end." I took a breath, tried to keep my voice steady. "Did you kill her?" The question hung in the air between us. Wade shifted uncomfortably, but Marcus Webb didn't flinch, didn't get angry, just looked at me with those sad eyes and said one word. "No." "The sheriff found welding supplies bought in your name 3 days before she died." "I bought welding wire. I buy it every month. I use a MIG welder for some of my work. Your grandmother didn't approve, but I'm not a purist like she was." "My grandmother wrote in her journal that you threatened her." Something flickered across his face, pain maybe, or regret. "We argued the day before she died, but I didn't threaten her, not the way you mean." He moved away from the anvil, pulled off his work gloves, gestured for us to sit on a bench near the wall. We sat. He remained standing. "I was Ruth's apprentice for 5 years," he said. 1998 to 2003, best 5 years of my life. She taught me everything: how to read metal, how to listen to the fire, how to make something that would outlast us all. So what happened? His jaw tightened. I wanted to modernize, use power hammers, gas forges, modern welding equipment, make the work easier, faster. Ruth said I was betraying the craft, said if I couldn't do it the old way, I shouldn't do it at all. He looked down at his hands. They were starting to curl, the joints swollen with arthritis. She threw me out, said I wasn't worthy of the Dalton name. I started my own forge, did things my way, but it never felt right. I'd lost something when I left her. 20 years passed. I built a business, shod horses for half the county, made a living, but I never forgot what she taught me, and I never stopped wanting to learn more. He looked at me directly. There's a technique called Damascus steel. Layers of different metals forged together to create patterns. It's been passed down in the Dalton family for generations. Your great-great-grandfather brought the knowledge from Scotland. It's a secret, not written down anywhere, just passed from master to apprentice. And you wanted her to teach you. I asked her, multiple times over the years. She always refused, said I'd forfeited that right when I chose modern methods over traditional ones. So you killed her for it? His face hardened. No. I asked her one last time the day before she died, told her I was getting old, arthritis making it hard to work, that I wanted to learn while I still could, while she still could. He was quiet for a moment. She said no. Said I'd made my choice 20 years ago and had to live with it. We argued. I said some things I regret, but I didn't threaten her, and I sure as hell didn't kill her. Then who did? I don't know, but I can tell you this. I loved Ruth Dalton. She was the best smith I ever knew, the best teacher, and I've spent 20 years angry at her. But murder? No, I'd never. He pulled something from his pocket, a small day planner worn at the edges, flipped to a page and showed it to me. The day your grandmother died was November 3rd. See that? I looked at the calendar. November 3rd was circled, written next to it, Denver, Farrier Convention. I was in Denver at a conference. 300 people can verify it. I have hotel receipts, attendance records, everything. I wasn't even in Wyoming when she died. Can I see those records? I asked. He didn't hesitate, went to a filing cabinet and pulled out a folder. Inside were hotel receipts from a Marriott in Denver, dated November 1st through November 4th. Conference attendance records with his name checked off from multiple seminars. Credit card statements showing charges in Denver on those dates. It was all there, a complete alibi. I felt something crumble inside me. I'd been so sure, so certain that this man was the killer, and now that certainty was turning to sand and slipping through my fingers. I'm sorry, I said. I shouldn't have accused you. Marcus Webb looked at me with something like understanding. You lost someone. You want answers. I get that. But I'm not your answer. Wade drove me back to the ranch in silence. I could feel him watching me out of the corner of his eye, waiting to see if I'd break down. But I didn't. I'd learned a long time ago that breaking down didn't change anything, didn't bring people back, didn't make the world less cruel. Back at my grandmother's house, I started going through her belongings. The house was small. 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, a kitchen with appliances from the 1970s, a living room with furniture that had seen better decades. Everything was clean but worn, functional but sparse. This was a house where someone had lived alone for a long time and stopped caring about comfort. My grandmother's bedroom was the smaller of the two. A single bed with a quilt that looked handmade, a dresser with a mirror that had gone cloudy with age, a nightstand with a lamp and a book about blacksmithing techniques. I started with the dresser. Opened the top drawer and found what old people keep in top drawers: reading glasses, a few pieces of jewelry that looked more sentimental than valuable, a small wooden box with buttons and safety pins. The second drawer held clothes, work shirts, worn soft from washing, jeans with patches on the knees, thermal underwear for Wyoming winters. The bottom drawer was stuck. I pulled harder, and it came free with a screech of wood on wood. Inside were blankets, or what looked like blankets at first, but when I lifted them out, I found something underneath. A cardboard box, not big, maybe the size of a shoebox, and it was heavy in a way that suggested paper, lots of paper. I carried it to the bed and opened it. Inside were letters, hundreds of them. They were bundled with rubber bands organized by year. Each envelope was addressed to me: Morgan Tate, various addresses, foster homes in Cheyenne, Casper, Laramie, Rock Springs, group homes, juvenile facilities, everywhere I'd been in the system. And every single envelope was stamped with the same words: return to sender, addressee refuses contact, or return to sender, address unknown. 294 letters. I counted them. 294 attempts to reach me over 14 years. Every birthday, every Christmas. Random dates throughout the year when my grandmother must have thought about me and couldn't help but write. I started reading them chronologically. The first was dated on my 8th birthday. My dearest Morgan, it began. Today you turn 8. I wonder if anyone is celebrating with you. I wonder if you're happy, if you're safe, if you know you're loved. I made you something. A small anvil, child-sized. You'll never use it, but I couldn't help myself. I imagine teaching you the craft someday. I imagine your small hands learning to shape metal, to create something permanent from something raw. I'm sorry I couldn't take you in. I tell myself it was for your own good, that the system would give you stability I couldn't provide. But late at night, I wonder if I was just a coward. Happy birthday, little one. Wherever you are, I hope you're being loved the way you deserve. My vision blurred. I wiped my eyes roughly and kept reading. The next letter was Christmas that same year. Morgan, it's Christmas. I'm sitting alone in this house, wondering what you're doing. Are you opening presents? Do you have a family who makes you feel special? Or are you in some group facility where Christmas is just another day? I want you to know that you're not forgotten. Even if these letters never reach you, even if you never know I'm thinking of you, you're not forgotten. I'm making you a gift I'll never be able to give you. A set of small tools. Hammer, tongs, small chisel, all sized for a child's hands. They sit in my workshop gathering dust, but making them made me feel closer to you. I moved forward through the years, letter after letter. My 9th birthday, my 10th. She documented her attempts to find me. Private investigators hired and fired when they couldn't navigate the system. Lawyers consulted who told her she had no legal standing. One letter from when I was 12 mentioned, watching me from a distance. I saw you today, Morgan. You were playing basketball outside a school in Casper. I drove there based on information my investigator found. I sat in the parking lot for 3 hours just watching you play. You're tall now, taller than your mother was at that age. You move with confidence, with strength. You made a shot from the 3-point line and I actually clapped, sitting alone in my truck like a fool. I wanted to walk over, to introduce myself, to tell you I'm sorry, but what right did I have? I abandoned you when you needed me most. What could I possibly say that would make that okay? So I watched from a distance, and when you went back inside, I drove home and cried for the first time since your grandfather died. I had to stop reading, had to stand up and walk around the room because my chest felt too tight to breathe properly. All those years, all those letters, She tried to reach me 294 times. And I'd never known. The letters from my teenage years were different, more desperate. She'd learned I was in trouble. The one from when I was 16 and in juvenile detention for fighting. Morgan, I heard what happened. That you fought off an older boy who was hurting a younger girl. That you broke his arm. That you were arrested. I'm proud of you for protecting someone weaker. And I'm heartbroken that you're in a place where that kind of protection is necessary. I've contacted a lawyer. He says there's nothing I can do from outside the system. You're a ward of the state. I have no legal standing, but I'm sending money to your account, whatever they'll allow. It's not much, but maybe it'll help. Please be safe. Please survive this. Please know that someone out there cares about you. The final letter was dated 6 months before she died. Morgan, you're almost 21, almost free of the system. I've been planning for this day for years. I have money saved. I have the ranch ready. I have everything prepared to give you the foundation I should have given you 14 years ago. I'm dying. The arthritis has spread to my lungs. The doctors give me maybe a year, so I'm making videos, tutorials, teaching you everything I know about blacksmithing. If I can't teach you in person, at least I can teach you this way. I hope you'll forgive me someday. I hope you'll understand that I made the choice I thought was right, even though it turned out to be the worst choice I ever made. I love you, Morgan. I've always loved you. And soon you'll have proof of that. Soon you'll have everything I have to give. I sat on the floor of my grandmother's bedroom surrounded by 294 letters and cried for the first time since I was 7 years old. Cried for the grandmother I'd never known, for the mother I'd lost, for the childhood that had been stolen, for all the years of believing I was unwanted when someone had been thinking about me every single day. Wade found me there an hour later, eyes swollen, letters scattered around me like snow. He didn't say anything, just sat down on the floor next to me and waited until I could speak. She tried, I finally said, 294 times, and every letter came back. Wade picked up one of the letters, read it, set it down gently. She never gave up on you, he said. Even when she couldn't reach you, she never gave up. Why didn't the letters get through? System rules. You were a minor in state custody. They control who can contact you. If your legal guardian or case worker determined contact wasn't in your best interest, they'd refuse it. Who would decide that? Your case worker, usually. I thought about Mrs. Alvarez, the tired woman who'd handed me the inheritance letter 3 days ago. She'd been my case worker for the last 4 years. Before that, there'd been others. I couldn't even remember all their names. Someone blocked these letters for 14 years. Someone made sure I never knew my grandmother was trying to reach me. Wade was quiet. Then he said, that's something you should ask Sheriff Harper about. That's not just cruel, it might be illegal. I gathered up the letters carefully, put them back in the box, carried them to the other bedroom, the one that was going to be mine now, set them on the dresser where I could see them. I needed to change clothes, needed to splash water on my face, needed to do something normal while my world kept tilting sideways. There was a knock on the front door. Wade went to answer it. I heard voices. A man's voice I didn't recognize, professional, confident, the voice of someone used to getting what he wanted. I walked into the living room to find a man in expensive outdoor wear shaking Wade's hand. He was maybe late 20s, good looking in that catalog model way. Dark hair, strong jawline, clothes that cost more than everything I owned combined. He had the kind of smile that worked on most people. It didn't work on me. You must be Morgan Tate, he said, turning that smile in my direction. I'm Cole Brennan, Wyoming Land Development Associates. He handed me a business card. Thick paper, embossed lettering. The kind of card that announced you were successful before you even opened your mouth. "I've been trying to acquire your grandmother's property for 2 years," he said. "I'm hoping you'll be more receptive than she was." "I'm not selling." His smile didn't waver. "I understand. This is all very new. You just got here. But I think once you understand the offer, you'll reconsider." He pulled out a folder and opened it on the coffee table. Inside were documents, maps, financial projections. $275,000, he said. "That's well above market value. The property is only worth about $180 on the open market, but we're prepared to pay a premium." "Why?" "Water rights. Your property controls the creek that feeds 6 ranches downstream, plus the location. We're developing a high-end resort destination, corporate retreats, wilderness experiences for people who want to feel like they're roughing it without actually roughing it. And my grandmother's forge would make an excellent spa building, or maybe a restaurant, boutique ironwork gallery. We have several concepts in development." I felt something cold move through me. My grandmother had spent 50 years building that forge, had created masterpieces in that space, had left it to me as a legacy, and this man wanted to turn it into a spa. "I'm not interested," I said. Cole's smile finally flickered. "Miss Tate, I understand emotional attachment, but let's be practical. You have $18,000 in the bank. Property taxes on this ranch are $6,000 a year. That's 3 years before you're broke, and that's assuming no other expenses. No repairs, no food, no utilities. The forge is beautiful, but it's not a business unless you're a blacksmith. Are you a blacksmith?" "Not yet." He leaned back, making a show of being reasonable. "Look, I grew up around here. My dad was a ranch hand. I know what it's like to struggle on land that barely sustains you. This offer is a way out. Take the money. Start over somewhere else. Build a life that doesn't involve fighting Wyoming winters and property taxes you can't afford." Wade spoke up. "Maybe you should give Morgan some time to think about it, Cole." Cole stood, leaving his folder on the table. "Of course, think about it, but don't think too long. The company has other options. This offer has an expiration date." He left with a final smile that was probably supposed to be charming and just came across as condescending. Wade closed the door behind him. His expression was dark. "Cole Brennan is a problem," he said. "You know him." "His dad worked for Ruth years ago. Good man. Cole went off to college, got a business degree, came back thinking he knew better than everyone who'd lived here their whole lives. He made my grandmother offers. 9 times in 2 years. She refused everyone. Said this land wasn't for sale, would never be for sale. Last time he came around, about 6 months before she died, she threw him off the property. Told him if he came back she'd set the dogs on him." "She had dogs?" "No, but Cole didn't know that." I looked at the folder he'd left, picked it up and dropped it in the trash. I spent the afternoon in the forge, watching my grandmother's videos. Video number 4 was titled Basic Techniques. In it, my grandmother demonstrated how to heat iron to the right temperature, how to hold the hammer, how to strike the anvil with rhythm and precision. "The first thing you need to understand is that iron is honest," she said into the camera. "It won't lie to you. Heat it right, it becomes workable. Heat it wrong, it burns. Strike it right, it moves where you want. Strike it wrong, it cracks." She picked up a piece of round stock, about half an inch thick, placed it in the forge, worked the bellows until the coals glowed white hot. "Watch the color," she said. "Black iron is cold. Red iron is warm but not workable. Orange is getting there. Yellow is perfect. White is too hot. She pulled the iron from the forge when it glowed yellow, brought it to the anvil, raised the hammer. 3-pound cross-peen hammer for general work. The cross-peen is for drawing out metal, making it longer and thinner. The flat face is for smoothing and shaping. She struck the iron. The sound rang through the forge clear and true. The iron moved under the blow, spreading slightly. She turned it, struck again, turned, struck, a rhythm like a heartbeat. Don't muscle it, let gravity do the work. Lift the hammer, let it fall, guide it, control it, but don't force it. She worked for 5 minutes, reheating the iron twice. At the end, she held up a simple S-hook, nothing fancy, but it was perfectly formed, symmetrical, functional. Your first project, she said to the camera, make this. Make it 100 times. When you can make an S-hook without thinking, you're ready to move on. I watched the video 3 more times, then I lit the forge. It took me 20 minutes to get the fire hot enough. I didn't know how much air to give it. Pumped the bellows too hard and sent sparks everywhere. Eased off and watched the fire die down. Finally found a rhythm that kept the coals glowing steady. I selected a piece of round stock from my grandmother's carefully organized materials, placed it in the fire, watched it heat, black to red to orange. I pulled it too early. The iron was orange but not yellow. When I placed it on the anvil and struck it with the hammer, nothing happened. The metal was too cool to move. Back in the fire. This time I waited longer. The iron went from orange to yellow to starting toward white. I pulled it and rushed to the anvil. Struck it, the iron moved, but too much. It was too hot. The edges started to burn, throwing sparks. The metal tore instead of spreading smoothly. Ruined, 40 cents worth of steel wasted. I tried again, got the temperature closer, but my hammer struck at the wrong angle. The iron bent instead of spreading, made a shape that looked nothing like an S-hook. Tried again, temperature right this time, but I forgot to turn the piece. Hammered the same side over and over, created something that looked like a hockey stick. Tried again, better, got the basic S shape, but one curve was bigger than the other, asymmetrical, ugly. An hour passed. I'd used up 6 pieces of steel, made 6 objects that weren't S-hooks. My arm ached from swinging the hammer. My hand hurt from gripping the tongs. My eyes burned from staring at hot metal. I was reaching for a 7th piece when Wade knocked on the door frame. "How's it going?" he asked. I showed him the pile of failures. He picked up the best one, the asymmetrical S-hook, examined it. "This isn't bad for a first try." "It's garbage." He smiled. "Your grandmother's first S-hook is in that drawer over there. She kept it to remind herself that everyone starts somewhere." He opened a drawer in the workbench and pulled out a twisted piece of iron that barely resembled an S-hook. It was crooked, lumpy, obviously the work of a beginner. She made that when she was 15. Took her 3 days to make something she wasn't ashamed to keep. You made yours in an hour. I don't have 3 days. I have 6 months to prove I deserve this place before someone takes it away. Wade set down the malformed hook. "No one can take it away. It's yours." Cole Brennan has 275,000 reasons to try. Marcus Webb wants the Damascus technique. The sheriff thinks I'm a grieving kid seeing murder where there's only accident. And I don't even know how to make a basic S-hook. Wade put his hand on my shoulder. "Your grandmother didn't learn this in a day, or a month, or a year. It took her a lifetime, and she left you 68 videos because she knew you'd need time." "I don't have time." "Then you better get back to work." He left me alone in the forge. I looked at my pile of failures, looked at my grandmother's first attempt in its drawer, looked at the forge still glowing with heat. I selected another piece of steel, placed it in the fire, watched it heat. Yellow this time, perfect. Pulled it, positioned it, raised the hammer. Struck. The iron moved, clean, true. I turned it, struck again. The rhythm my grandmother had demonstrated. Lift, fall, guide, lift, fall, guide. Reheat, strike, turn, reheat, strike, turn. 20 minutes later, I held up my seventh attempt. It wasn't perfect. One curve was still slightly larger than the other, but it was recognizable, functional, an actual S-hook. I hung it on the wall next to my grandmother's first one. 7 try, 6 failure, 1 success. That night I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed in my grandmother's house, listening to the wind outside and thinking about everything I'd learned. My grandmother's letters, Marcus Webb's alibi, Cole Brennan's offer, my own inadequacy with the hammer. At 2 in the morning, I got up and went to the kitchen for water. Noticed a door I hadn't opened yet. Thought it was a pantry. It was stairs, leading down to a basement I hadn't known existed. I flipped the light switch. A single bulb illuminated a small room below. Concrete walls, dirt floor, and boxes, dozens of boxes. I went down. The boxes were labeled, Rebecca's things, school papers, art projects, photos. My mother's childhood, archived in cardboard. I opened the box labeled photos. Inside were albums, the old kind with sticky pages and plastic covers. I opened the first one. My mother as a baby, as a toddler, as a young girl standing next to a man who must have been my grandfather. She had dark hair like mine, the same gray eyes, the same expression that always looked like she was evaluating whether to trust you. More photos, my mother as a teenager, graduation photos, her standing in the forge with my grandmother, both of them smiling. A photo of her at maybe 17, standing next to a young man I didn't recognize. He had his arm around her shoulders. She was leaning into him, happy. I turned the photo over. Written on the back in faded ink, Rebecca and Thomas, summer 1989. Thomas, not David Tate, my supposed father, Thomas. I kept flipping through the album, found another photo. My mother, visibly pregnant, standing in front of the ranch house, alone this time, looking tired but determined. On the back, Rebecca, 6 months along, May 1991. May 1991. I was born in July 1991. I went back upstairs and found the box of my grandmother's papers, pulled out my birth certificate, the official one that had been in the estate documents. Father unknown. Not David Tate, unknown. I sat at the kitchen table as the sun came up, holding my birth certificate and the photo of my mother with someone named Thomas. My whole life I'd believed David Tate was my father. The few memories I had before the fire included a man I'd called Dad, but he'd left when I was 5, just walked away, and I'd always wondered why. Maybe because I wasn't his daughter, maybe because my mother had lied to him, maybe because he couldn't look at me without seeing someone else. I didn't know what to feel. Anger, relief, confusion, all of it mixed together like metals in an alloy, creating something I didn't have a name for yet. There was a knock on the door. I opened it to find a woman in her 40s holding a clipboard and looking official. Morgan Tate, she extended her hand. Sarah Chen, Fremont County Assessor's Office. I shook her hand automatically. I'm here to conduct the property assessment required for ownership transfer. It's standard procedure. Mind if I come in? She didn't wait for an answer, just walked past me into the house and started making notes on her clipboard. Over the next 2 hours, she examined every inch of the property. The house, the barn, the outbuildings, and especially the forge. She took photos, made measurements, wrote page after page of notes. When she finished, she handed me a document. "I'm afraid there are some issues," she said. Her voice was professionally sympathetic, the kind of sympathy that comes right before bad news. "What kind of issues?" "The forge building doesn't meet current commercial safety codes. Electrical system is outdated. Fire suppression inadequate. Ventilation requires upgrading. Storage of flammable materials isn't compliant with county regulations. This forge has operated for 70 years. Under a grandfathered exemption that expired with your grandmother's death. New owner means new inspection, and I'm afraid the building doesn't pass." She handed me another document. This one had a county seal at the top and a list of violations numbered 1 through 12. "You have 10 days to remediate these issues or the forge will be condemned and sealed pending full compliance." 10 days, I looked at the list. Electrical rewiring, new fire suppression system, ventilation upgrades, chemical storage containers. The estimated cost at the bottom of the page was $28,000. "I have $18,000 in the bank." "Then you'll need to find financing. Or sell. The county can provide a list of approved contractors if you'd like to proceed with remediation." She left me standing on the porch holding paper that might as well have been an eviction notice. Wade came over that evening. I showed him the violations notice, watched his face darken as he read. "This is Cole Brennan," he said. "Has to be. The assessor works for the county. Sarah Chen's brother-in-law does contract work for Wyoming Land Development. This is how they squeeze people, create violations, force expensive repairs, then show up with an offer right when you're desperate. Can they do that? It's legal, barely, but it's coordinated. I've seen it happen to 3 other families in the last 5 years. Same pattern every time. So what do I do?" Wade was quiet for a long moment. Then he said something that surprised me. "You fight and you let people help you." "What people?" "This community. Your grandmother helped a lot of folks over the years. Now it's time to return the favor." The next day, Wade made some calls. I didn't know who he talked to or what he said. But that afternoon, people started showing up. The first to arrive was a man named Jim Harris, who owned the hardware store in town. He brought his son and a truck full of electrical supplies. "Your grandmother wired my store for free when I was starting out," he said. "Time to pay that forward." Then came Bill Morrison, a welder. "Your grandmother made custom gates for our ranch, wouldn't take payment, said neighbors help neighbors." More people came. An electrician, a carpenter, a woman who worked for the fire department and knew the code requirements for suppression systems. They worked for 3 days, rewired the forge building, installed new fire extinguishers and a sprinkler system, built proper storage for chemicals, reinforced structural supports that didn't actually need reinforcing but that would satisfy any inspector who came looking. I tried to help, but mostly I just stayed out of the way and provided coffee and sandwiches bought with money I couldn't afford to spend. On the 3rd day, Wade called for a county reinspection. A different inspector came this time, walked through with his clipboard, checked every item on Sarah Chen's list. Everything passed. The cease operations order was lifted. I stood in the forge, surrounded by people who'd spent 3 days helping a stranger, and for the first time since arriving in Wyoming, I felt something other than alone. That night, Wade and I sat on the porch of my grandmother's house. The sun was setting behind the Wind River Range, painting the sky in colors I didn't have names for. "Thank you," I said. "Don't thank me. Thank your grandmother, she built something here. Relationships, trust, community. You inherited more than land and a forge. You inherited a place in something larger than yourself. I don't deserve it. Neither did she when she started. She earned it over 50 years. You'll earn it too. I thought about Cole Brennan's offer. $275,000 for a fresh start somewhere else. No community, no legacy, no connection to anyone or anything. And I thought about these people who'd shown up because my grandmother had helped them decades ago, who'd given 3 days of their time to help her granddaughter they'd never met. That was worth more than money could buy. Wade stood to leave, paused at the steps. "There's something you should know," he said, "about Marcus Webb." "What about him?" "His father was James Dalton, your grandmother's brother-in-law, Thomas Dalton's twin brother. My grandfather had a brother. Identical twin. They ran a forge together back in the 70s, competed viciously. Both wanted to be the best. Both wanted your grandmother's attention." "What happened?" Wade's face was grim. "They fought, in the forge. James wanted your grandmother to teach him a special Damascus technique that had been Thomas's alone. She refused. James went to Thomas, demanded he share it. Thomas said no. The fight got physical. James struck Thomas with a hammer, killed him, made it look like an accident. I felt ice move through my veins. Your grandmother knew, but she couldn't prove it. James was Thomas's identical twin. Same fingerprints on everything. Same DNA. No witnesses. And she had a 3-year-old daughter to protect. So she testified that it looked like an accident. James left Wyoming. No one's seen him since. And Marcus is James's son. He doesn't know. His mother told him his father left when he was young, and they moved to Nevada for a fresh start. Marcus didn't even know he had family in Wyoming until he was an adult. Does Marcus know what his father did? No, and Ruth could never trust him because of it. She looked at him and saw the man who killed her husband, even though Marcus had nothing to do with it. That's why she wouldn't teach him the Damascus technique. That's why, not because he didn't deserve it, because she couldn't separate the son from the father. I sat with that knowledge as the last light faded from the sky. My grandmother had kept that secret for 40 years, had punished Marcus Webb for a crime his father committed, had died without ever telling him the truth. And now I knew. Now I had to decide what to do with that knowledge. The stars came out one by one. Wyoming stars, harder and brighter than any I'd seen in the city. Cold light from distant fires, like the forge, like the truth. Everything I thought I knew kept turning out to be more complicated. My grandmother wasn't just a woman who'd rejected me. She was a woman who'd been protecting me. Marcus Webb wasn't a killer. He was a man carrying a legacy he didn't even know he had. And I wasn't David Tate's daughter. I was someone named Thomas's daughter, and I had no idea who that made me. But I was Ruth Dalton's granddaughter. That much was true. That much was mine. And I had work to do. The 7th anvil haunted me. I searched the forge every morning for a week, looking for something I'd missed. A hidden compartment. A false wall. Some secret my grandmother had built into the building itself. I measured the dimensions of the room against the exterior walls, looking for spaces that didn't add up. I examined every anvil again, tapping them for hollow spots, checking for seams that might indicate they opened somehow. Nothing. 6 anvils, all solid steel, all exactly what they appeared to be. Find the 7th anvil, my grandmother had written. It holds the truth about everything. But there was no 7th anvil, at least not one I could see. I was working through video number 12 when something caught my attention. My grandmother was demonstrating how to forge a chisel, talking about steel selection and heat treatment. But halfway through the video, she paused, looked directly at the camera with an expression I'd seen before. The same look she'd had in video 52 when she'd mentioned the locked iron box. She was trying to tell me something. "Before we continue," she said, "I want to show you something my grandfather taught me. A tradition passed down through 4 generations of Daltons." She walked away from the anvil to a corner of the forge I recognized. The corner where the iron box sat. But in this video, recorded maybe 10 years ago, the box wasn't there yet. Instead, there was a workbench. She knelt beside the bench and ran her hand along the underside of the top surface, pressed something. A section of the bench top lifted away, revealing a hollow space underneath. "Every craftsman needs a place to hide their most important work," she said. "Not from thieves, from time, from forgetting, from losing what matters most." She placed something inside the hollow space. I couldn't see what it was. Then she closed the panel and stood. The camera cut. The video continued with the chisel demonstration. I rewound and watched that section 3 times. Then I went to that workbench in the forge. It was the same one. The wood had aged, the surface more scarred now, but it was definitely the same bench. I knelt beside it and ran my hands along the underside of the top, feeling for a mechanism. My fingers found a small wooden button, barely noticeable. I pressed it. Nothing happened. I pressed harder, felt something give, tried sliding the panel. It moved, grinding against wood that had swollen with decades of humidity. I pulled harder. The panel came free. Inside the hollow space was something wrapped in oiled canvas, heavy, dense, the size and shape of a small anvil. I lifted it out carefully, set it on the forge floor, unwrapped the canvas. It was an anvil, but not like the others. This one was maybe a quarter the size, maybe 40 pounds, old. The steel was hand-forged, showing hammer marks from its creation, and it was hollow, not solid like a working anvil. This was a container shaped like an anvil. The 7th anvil. It opened with a seam around the middle. I twisted the top half. It unscrewed with resistance, metal grinding against metal. Inside were items wrapped individually in cloth. The first was a leather-bound journal, smaller than the one I'd found in my grandmother's desk. The cover was worn smooth from handling. I opened it to the first page. The handwriting was different from my grandmother's, older style, masculine. The date at the top was October 1983. "This is the account of Thomas Dalton. If you're reading this, I'm dead and my wife Ruth has finally decided to share the truth." My grandfather. This was my grandfather's journal. I kept reading. "My brother James and I built this forge together in 1972. We were identical twins, learned blacksmithing from our father, both married to the craft and to competition with each other. We told ourselves competition made us better smiths. Truth is, it made us worse men. The Damascus steel technique has been in our family since our great-grandfather brought it from Scotland in 1889. It's a secret, not written down, passed father to son through demonstration and repetition. Our father taught us both, made us swear never to share it outside the family. James wanted to sell it, wanted to make money off what we knew. I refused, said it dishonored our father's memory. We fought about it for months. Today, October 15, 1983, James demanded I teach Ruth the technique. She's my wife. She has the right to know. But James doesn't want her to know for tradition's sake. He wants to use her. She's a better smith than either of us. He thinks if she knows the technique, she'll create pieces he can sell to collectors. I refused him. We fought here in this forge. He struck me with a 3-pound hammer, caught me across the temple. I went down. Everything went red. When I came to, I was alone, blood running down my face. James was gone. I'm writing this now while I still can. My vision keeps blurring. I think my skull is fractured. I should go to the hospital, but I need to document this first. If something happens to me, if I don't wake up tomorrow, James killed me. It wasn't an accident. It was murder over a secret that should have died with our father. Ruth, if you're reading this, I'm sorry. I'm sorry I chose pride over safety. I'm sorry I didn't just teach you the technique and avoid this whole fight. I'm sorry I won't get to see our daughter grow up. Protect Rebecca, protect the craft, and don't trust James. He's my brother and I love him, but he's willing to kill for what he wants. The entry ended there. I flipped through the rest of the journal, empty pages. My grandfather had never written again. The second item in the hollow anvil was a cassette tape in a plastic case, written on the label in my grandmother's handwriting, for Marcus, the apology I was too proud to give in person. The third item was a folded piece of paper. I opened it carefully. It was a formula. Chemical compositions, temperature ranges, timing sequences. At the top, in my grandfather's handwriting, Damascus steel, Dalton family method. The secret Marcus had wanted. The knowledge my grandmother had refused him. Here, in a hollow anvil waiting to be found. The fourth and final item was an envelope addressed to me, sealed with wax that had gone brittle with age. I broke the seal and pulled out a single sheet of paper. Morgan, my grandmother had written in the shaky handwriting of her final months. If you found this, you've learned the truth about your grandfather's death, about James, about the secret I've kept for 40 years. I testified that Thomas's death was an accident because I was afraid. James was violent, unpredictable. I had a 3-year-old daughter. I was alone. I chose safety over justice. I've lived with that cowardice ever since. And I've punished Marcus Webb for his father's sins because I couldn't separate the son from the killer. The Damascus technique should have been Marcus's to learn years ago. He earned it through 5 years of dedicated apprenticeship. I denied him out of fear and spite. The tape contains my apology. The formula is his inheritance, same as this forge is yours. I'm asking you to do what I couldn't. Give him the truth. Let him know he was never the problem. His father was, and I was too damaged to see past that. Do better than I did. Be braver than I was. I sat on the concrete floor of the forge, surrounded by the contents of the seventh anvil. My grandfather's confession, my grandmother's apology, a secret worth killing for, and the knowledge that Marcus Webb had spent 20 years believing he wasn't good enough when the truth was my grandmother had been too broken to teach him. I needed to talk to Marcus, needed to give him what my grandmother should have given him decades ago. But first, I needed to understand what was on that tape. Wade had a cassette player in his truck, one of those old units installed in the dash back when that was standard equipment. He let me sit in the cab alone and listen. The tape started with static, then my grandmother's voice, weaker than in the videos. This had been recorded near the end. Marcus, if you're hearing this, I'm gone and my granddaughter had the courage I lacked. There was a long pause. I could hear her breathing, labored and rough. You came to me when you were 26 years old. You wanted to learn blacksmithing. You had no experience, no training, just determination and a respect for the craft that I recognized because I'd felt it myself. I took you on as an apprentice. For 5 years you worked harder than anyone I'd ever taught. You were talented, patient, dedicated. You had everything it took to be a master smith. And then you wanted to modernize. Use power tools, gas forges, modern welding equipment. I threw you out, told you that you'd betrayed the craft. The truth is more complicated. Your father was James Dalton, Thomas Dalton's twin brother. Thomas was my husband, your uncle, though you never knew him. James killed Thomas in 1983, beat him to death with a hammer right here in this forge over a family secret. I testified it was an accident to protect my daughter. James left Wyoming and I thought he was gone forever. Then you showed up, 26 years old, James's son. You looked like your father, moved like him, had his hands, and I couldn't separate you from him. Every time I looked at you, I saw the man who killed my husband. It wasn't fair. It wasn't your fault, but I couldn't get past it. When you wanted to learn the Damascus technique, I refused. Not because you didn't deserve it, because teaching you felt like giving victory to James, like saying what he did didn't matter. I was wrong. You earned that knowledge. You earned my trust. And I failed you because I was too damaged to see you for who you were instead of who your father was. I'm sorry, Marcus. I'm sorry I let my pain punish you for crimes you didn't commit. I'm sorry I never had the courage to tell you this in person. The Damascus formula is in this anvil. It's yours now. Teach it. Share it. Don't make my mistake of hoarding knowledge out of fear. You're a good man. You always were. I just couldn't see it. The tape ended. I sat in Wade's truck for a long time, listening to the silence after my grandmother's voice, thinking about the weight of secrets, the cost of fear, the way damage gets passed down through generations like an inheritance nobody wants. I drove to Marcus's forge alone. Wade offered to come, but this felt like something I needed to do by myself. This was my grandmother's apology to deliver, my family's debt to settle. Marcus was working when I arrived. I could hear the hammer before I reached the building, steady, rhythmic, but slower than before. When I stepped inside, I saw why. His hands were wrapped in compression gloves, the kind people wear for arthritis, and between strikes, he flexed his fingers like he was trying to convince them to keep working. He saw me and stopped, set down the hammer with visible relief. "Morgan," he said, "didn't expect to see you again. I need to show you something." I pulled out the cassette tape, told him where I'd found it, told him what was on it. Your grandmother left me a message. An apology and an explanation about why she couldn't teach you, about why she refused you for 20 years. He looked at the tape like it might burn him. "I don't know if I want to hear it." "You need to. She needed you to know the truth." We sat in his small office, a room barely bigger than a closet with a desk and a filing cabinet and a space heater that rattled when it ran. I played the tape on an old boom box he pulled from a shelf. Marcus listened without moving. His face didn't change expression, but his hands gripped the edge of the desk so hard his knuckles went white. When the tape ended, he sat in silence for 5 minutes. Then he said one word. "James. Your father, my grandfather's killer." I never knew. My mother told me he left when I was young, that we moved to Nevada for a fresh start. She never told me why, never mentioned Wyoming, never said I had family here. She was protecting you. From what? From knowing my father was a murderer. From becoming him, from carrying that weight. Marcus stood, walked to the window, looked out at his small forge, his struggling business, the life he'd built from the scraps my grandmother had given him. I spent 20 years angry at her, 20 years thinking I wasn't good enough, that I'd failed some test she never explained, and all that time she was just afraid. She left you something else. I handed him the Damascus formula. He unfolded it slowly. Read it again. His hands started shaking. "This is it. This is what I've been trying to learn for 2 decades. It's yours now. She wanted you to have it." He looked at me. "Why are you giving me this? You could keep it. Use it yourself, it's valuable. Because she asked me to, because you earned it, and because I'm not going to make her mistakes. Marcus folded the formula carefully, placed it in his desk drawer like it was made of glass. Thank you, he said, and then quieter, I'm sorry about Ruth. I know I said it before, but I mean it. She was the best teacher I ever had. I loved her even when I was angry. She loved you too. She just couldn't find a way to show it. I left him sitting in his office, staring at the drawer that held a secret 4 generations old, wondering if teaching him had been the right choice or just another way to complicate an already complicated situation. The drive back to the ranch took me past Cole Brennan's office. Wyoming Land Development Associates operated out of a converted gas station on the edge of town. I almost drove past. Then I didn't. I parked and went inside. The office was trying hard to look professional. Expensive furniture, framed photos of resort properties on the walls, a receptionist who looked like she'd been hired for appearance rather than skill. I need to see Cole Brennan. The receptionist glanced at her computer. Do you have an appointment? No, but he'll want to see me. She made a call. 2 minutes later, Cole emerged from a back office. He was wearing a suit this time, expensive, the kind that whispered money instead of shouting it. Morgan, this is a surprise. Have you reconsidered my offer? I want to know why you really want my grandmother's property. He gestured to his office. Come on back. The office was small but carefully designed. Desk positioned to put the sun behind him during negotiations. Leather chairs that sat lower than his, a psychological trick to make visitors feel subordinate. Photos on the wall of him shaking hands with people who looked important. He settled behind his desk, gestured for me to sit. I remained standing. The water rights are valuable, I said, but not $275,000 valuable. What aren't you telling me? Cole's professional smile flickered, didn't quite recover. You're smarter than I gave you credit for. I'm smarter than you think. Now answer the question. He leaned back in his chair, decided something. The smile disappeared entirely, replaced by something more real, calculation mixed with respect. Mineral rights, he said. There's a formation that runs under your property, extends into federal land. My company has done geological surveys, preliminary drilling. We think there's natural gas. How much? Enough to make my career, maybe enough to make me rich. And my grandmother knew. She knew we were interested, but she never knew why. We told her resort development. She refused anyway. Why tell me now? Because you deserve the truth. And because I'm gambling, you'll be smarter about this than she was. Smarter meaning I'll sell to you. Smarter meaning you'll understand that $275,000 is generous for a struggling ranch, and a forge you don't know how to run. But it's insulting compared to what the mineral rights are worth. What are they worth? He named a number that made my stomach drop. 7 figures, maybe 8. So why the lowball offer? Because my company thinks you're desperate, young, inexperienced. They think you'll take the first offer and be grateful. But you don't think that. No, I think you're Ruth Dalton's granddaughter. And Ruth was the most stubborn woman I ever met. She'd have burned the property to the ground before selling it to someone trying to cheat her. I'm not my grandmother. No, Cole said, but you could be. He pulled out a different folder, opened it on his desk. Here's a real offer. Access rights to drill on your property. You retain ownership. We pay you a percentage of whatever we extract. Standard rate is 12%. I can probably get you 15 if you negotiate hard. And if there's nothing down there? Then you've lost nothing. You still own the land, still have the forge, still have options. Why are you helping me? He was quiet for a moment. Then he said something I hadn't expected. My father was Thomas Brennan. He worked for your grandmother in the late 80s. He died in a car accident in 1991. The name hit me like cold water. Thomas Brennan. The name on the back of the photograph. The man standing next to my mother. Thomas was my father's older brother, Cole continued. I never knew him. He died before I was born, but my dad talked about him sometimes. Said he was brilliant. Said he was in love with someone he couldn't have. He pulled a photograph from his wallet. Old, faded. A man who looked like a younger version of Cole standing next to someone I recognized. My mother, pregnant, happy. That's Thomas and your mother, summer of 1991. My dad kept this photo. Never told me who the woman was. Just said it was Thomas's great love. The pieces clicked together in my head. Thomas Brennan, my mother pregnant. A birth certificate that said father unknown. Thomas Brennan was my father. Cole nodded slowly. I figured it out when I saw you. You have his eyes, his hands, and you showed up with Ruth's inheritance, which meant Rebecca was your mother. We're related. Third cousins. Thomas was my father's brother, your father. That makes us family, distant but family. I sat down then, not because the chair was offered, but because my legs forgot how to hold me up. Does anyone else know? I haven't told anyone. Wasn't sure if you knew. Wasn't sure if it mattered. It matters. Cole closed the folder, pushed it across the desk toward me. Take this, think about it. Talk to a lawyer. Don't make any decisions while you're processing this. I took the folder, stood to leave, paused at the door. Why did you push so hard to buy the property if you knew we were related? Because I work for the company. They don't know about the connection. And until 5 minutes ago, I wasn't sure you'd believe me if I told you. And now I'm hoping you'll trust me enough to make a smart decision instead of a stubborn one. I left his office carrying a folder full of mineral rights information and a family connection I hadn't known existed. The world kept getting more complicated. Every answer led to 3 new questions. Back at the ranch, I started working on Damascus steel. The formula from the hollow anvil was detailed, specific. It listed exact ratios of high-carbon steel to low-carbon steel, precise temperatures for welding heat, the number of folds required to create the pattern, the quenching technique, the etching acid composition. I gathered materials, cut pieces of 1095 high-carbon steel and mild low-carbon steel, stacked them in alternating layers, wire-tied the stack together so it wouldn't shift during heating. Then I lit the forge. The process was meticulous. Heat the stack to 2300 degrees Fahrenheit. At that temperature, the steel becomes plastic. Hammer it flat, welding the layers together through force and heat. Fold it, heat again, hammer again. Each fold doubles the number of layers. My first attempt failed in the first 5 minutes. The steel got too hot, went from yellow to white to burning. The layers separated instead of welding. Sparks flew. The whole stack crumbled into useless pieces. Second attempt. Better temperature control, but I hammered too hard. The steel spread unevenly. One side thin, the other thick, unusable. Third attempt. Temperature right. Hammering controlled, but I forgot to flux the steel properly. Scale formed between the layers. They didn't weld clean. When I tried to fold it, the whole piece delaminated. Fourth attempt. Everything right for the first 3 folds. 8 layers, 16 layers, 32 layers. Then I let the temperature drop too low. The steel wouldn't move. I hammered harder. It cracked. I worked for 8 hours straight, made 7 attempts, failed 7 times. Each failure taught me something, but each failure also wasted expensive steel and showed me how far I had to go. Wade found me sitting on the forge floor, surrounded by ruined metal at midnight. "How's it going?" he asked. I showed him the pile of failures. "Damascus steel is hard. It's impossible. I don't know how anyone ever figured this out. Trial and error, same as you're doing, except they had lifetimes to learn. You're trying to compress it into weeks." "I don't have lifetimes. I have whatever time it takes for the next crisis to show up." Wade sat down next to me. "You know what your grandmother told me once? She said the iron doesn't care if you're in a hurry. It only cares if you're paying attention." "I'm paying attention. I'm just not good enough yet." "Not yet, but you will be." The next day, Marcus Webb drove up to the ranch. I watched him get out of his truck, carrying something wrapped in canvas. He moved stiffly. The arthritis was getting worse. "I tried the formula," he said without preamble. "Made my first Damascus blade last night. Took me 6 hours and 4 tries, but I got it." He unwrapped the canvas. Inside was a knife blade, maybe 8 inches long. The pattern in the steel was visible even without etching. Waves of light and dark metal flowing like water frozen in steel. It was beautiful. "I came to say thank you and to offer you a deal." "What kind of deal?" "Teach each other. You help me with modern techniques I never learned. I help you with Damascus. We share knowledge instead of hoarding it." I looked at the blade he'd made, then at my pile of failures from the night before. "Why would you help me? I'm Ruth's heir. I got everything you wanted." His expression softened. "You're not Ruth's heir. You're Ruth's second chance. She left you the property. She left me the knowledge. Maybe we're both her heirs. Maybe she wanted us to work together." "Partners." He extended his hand. "Partners." We shook on it. Over the next week, Marcus came to the ranch 3 times. He showed me what I was doing wrong, helped me understand the rhythm of Damascus forging, the way the steel talks if you listen, the patience required to let the process work instead of forcing it. By the end of the week, I'd made my first successful Damascus billet, 32 layers, not enough for a blade yet, but clean, properly welded, the pattern visible when I etched a small section in acid. Marcus examined it with the critical eye of someone who'd spent 40 years working metal. "This is good," he said. "This is better than my first one." "You're lying." "I'm not. You have good hands, Ruth's hands. You'll be better than both of us if you keep working." His hands shook slightly as he handed the billet back. The tremor was getting worse. I'd noticed it over the week. Some days he could barely grip the hammer. "How bad is it?" I asked. "The arthritis." I nodded. "Bad enough that I'm facing retirement. Doctor says I have maybe 5 years before I can't forge at all, maybe less." "I'm sorry." "Don't be. 5 years is more than some people get. I'm going to use them. Going to teach what I know before it's too late." "Who will you teach?" He looked at me. "You, if you'll keep learning, and anyone else who's serious about the craft. Ruth hoarded knowledge because she was afraid. I'm not going to make that mistake." We worked until sunset. Then he left, driving slowly down the gravel road like a man who knew every bump would hurt his joints. I was cleaning up the forge when I heard a vehicle approach. Not Marcus's truck, something bigger. A full-size pickup with a diesel engine that rattled. The truck parked near the forge. The door opened. A man got out. He was old, maybe late 70s. Tall, still powerfully built despite his age. He moved like someone who'd spent a lifetime doing physical work. His face was weathered, lined deep, and his eyes were cold. The kind of cold that comes from carrying hate for so long it becomes part of who you are. I knew who he was before he spoke. He looked exactly like the photos I'd seen of my grandfather. Identical twin faces, except my grandfather had kind eyes. This man's eyes held nothing but calculation and rage. James Dalton, my great-uncle, my grandfather's killer, the man who was supposed to have disappeared 40 years ago. He walked into my forge like he owned it, looked around at the tools, the anvils, the work I'd been doing. "So you're Ruth's granddaughter," he said. His voice was rough, damaged from decades of smoking or drinking or both. I didn't answer. I was calculating distances. The door was 20 feet away. My phone was in the house. The nearest neighbor was half a mile. I was alone with a murderer in an isolated building. "I heard Ruth died," he continued. "Heard some city girl inherited everything. Figured I'd come see what she left behind. You're not welcome here." He smiled. It wasn't a pleasant expression. This forge was supposed to be mine. Thomas and I built it together. Then he got greedy, wanted to keep all the secrets for himself, so I took what was mine. "You killed him." He struck me first. I just hit back harder. He was reaching for a hammer, 3-pound cross peen, the same kind that had killed my grandfather. I grabbed the closest thing I could reach, a pair of tongs, long-handled, steel, not much of a weapon but better than nothing. "You can't have this place," I said. My voice was steadier than I felt. "Can I? You're what, 21? You've been here, what, 3 weeks? You think you can stop me?" He swung the hammer, not at me, at the nearest anvil. The impact rang through the forge, a threat, a demonstration of strength. I could burn this place to the ground, make it look like an accident, just like I did with the vents when Ruth got too close to the truth. My blood went cold. "You killed my grandmother." She was going to expose me, tell everyone what I did to Thomas. I couldn't let that happen. He swung the hammer again, this time at a workbench. The wood splintered. "But you didn't kill her," I said, trying to buy time. "You weren't even here." "Wasn't I?" He smiled. "I've been watching this place for 2 years, waiting for Ruth to die, waiting for the inheritance to go to someone who couldn't defend it. You made it easy." The night she died, I was here. Welded the vents shut myself, watched from the woods while she died. Would have done it years ago, but I wanted to see her suffer first, wanted her to know what was coming. He was moving closer. I was backing toward the door, trying to keep the anvil between us. "And then you showed up, Ruth's little heir. Thought you could just walk in and take what should have been mine. It was never yours. You killed for it and still didn't get it." He charged, faster than someone his age should move, swung the hammer at my head. I ducked. The hammer passed so close I felt the wind. I swung the tongs, caught him across the arm. It wasn't a hard hit, but it surprised him. He stumbled back. I ran for the door. He was faster, grabbed me from behind. We went down hard. My head cracked against the concrete floor. Everything went white for a second. When my vision cleared, he was on top of me, the hammer raised, his face twisted with rage. "You're going to die just like your grandfather, just like Ruth, just like anyone who tries to keep me from what's mine." The hammer started to fall. Then the forge door crashed open. Cole Brennan came through like a linebacker, hitting James low and hard. They rolled across the floor. The hammer went flying. I scrambled up, grabbed the hammer. My head was spinning, but I could see Cole and James fighting. James was older but desperate. Cole was younger, but James was fighting with the strength of someone with nothing to lose. James got his hands around Cole's throat. Cole's face started to turn red. I swung the hammer, not at James, at the floor next to his head. The impact was deafening. "Let him go, or the next one hits you." James looked up at me, saw the hammer raised, saw I meant it. He let go of Cole and rolled away, came to his feet. For a second I thought he'd charge again. Then we heard sirens in the distance. Someone had called the police. James ran, out the back door of the forge, into the darkness. I heard his truck start, heard gravel spray as he tore out of there. Cole was on the floor, gasping. His throat was already bruising where James had choked him. "Are you okay?" I asked. He nodded, couldn't speak yet. The sirens got louder. Sheriff Harper's cruiser came up the drive with lights flashing. 2 more vehicles behind him. Deputies. Wade was with them. He'd been the one to call. He'd seen James's truck turning onto my property and knew something was wrong. Sheriff Harper took my statement, took Cole's statement, put out an APB for James Dalton, wanted for assault, wanted for questioning in Ruth's murder, wanted for the 40-year-old murder of Thomas Dalton. We all knew he wouldn't be caught. He disappeared once. He could do it again. But at least now the truth was out. At least people knew. Cole drove me to the hospital. I had a concussion from hitting my head on the concrete. Nothing serious, but they wanted to keep me overnight for observation. "You saved my life," I said. "You saved mine right back. Why did you come?" "Wade called me, said he had a bad feeling I was close by, figured I'd check on you." We were quiet for a moment. Then I said, "You're my cousin." "Third cousin barely counts." "It counts to me." He smiled, "Me too." In the hospital bed that night, I thought about everything that had happened. James Dalton was still out there. The ranch still needed work. I still didn't know how to run a forge as a business. Cole's company still wanted mineral rights I wasn't sure I should sell. Marcus was teaching me, but his time was limited. Everything was still complicated, still messy, still uncertain. But I wasn't alone anymore. I had Wade and June. I had Marcus teaching me. I had Cole watching my back. I had a community that had shown up to help when I needed it. And I had my grandmother's legacy. Not just property and tools, but knowledge, purpose, a place in something larger than myself. James Dalton had tried to take that away, had killed my grandfather for it, had killed my grandmother to protect his secret. But he'd failed. The forge was still standing. The knowledge was being shared instead of hoarded. And I was still here, learning to read the iron, learning to create something permanent from something raw. The nurse came in to check my vitals, asked if I needed anything for pain. "I'm okay," I said. And for the first time since arriving in Wyoming, I meant it. The concussion kept me in the hospital for 3 days. Doctor's orders. They wanted to monitor for bleeding, for swelling, for any sign that my brain was going to betray me the way James Dalton had tried to. Cole visited every day, brought coffee that didn't taste like dishwater, sat in the uncomfortable chair beside my bed and talked about nothing important. The weather, the ranch. His failed attempts to learn blacksmithing from YouTube videos before giving up. On the second day, Sheriff Harper came. He pulled up a chair and set a folder on the rolling table that served as both desk and meal tray. "We found James's truck," he said, "abandoned at the bus station in Rock Springs. He's in the wind." So he got away. For now, but we've got warrants out in 6 states. Federal marshals are involved because of the interstate flight. He won't stay hidden forever. He stayed hidden for 40 years. Harper's expression was grim. That was before cell phones and security cameras and national databases. World's different now. Harder to disappear. But not impossible. No, not impossible. He opened the folder. Inside were crime scene photos from my grandmother's forge, the sealed exhaust vent, close-ups of the welding, lab reports. "We exhumed your grandfather's body," he said quietly. "Medical examiner found evidence consistent with blunt force trauma to the skull. The original autopsy was cursory. They missed it, or didn't want to see it. Can you prove James did it?" "Not without a confession or a witness. But combined with his attack on you, his admission in your presence, we can make a case. If we catch him." "When you catch him." Harper looked at me, appreciated the confidence but didn't share it. When he agreed. "There's something else," he said. "We're investigating your grandmother's death more thoroughly. The welding on those vents was professional work. James has blacksmithing skills, but this was modern technique. MIG welding. James was a traditionalist like Ruth, never used modern equipment. So he had help. Or he bought the equipment specifically for this. We found a receipt at a welding supply shop in Riverton. Purchased 3 days before Ruth died. Paid cash. But the store has security footage. We're reviewing it now." He showed me a grainy still image from the security camera. A man in a baseball cap and sunglasses. Could be James. Could be anyone. "It's not much," Harper admitted, "but it's something." After he left, I sat in the hospital bed thinking about justice. How slow it moved. How uncertain. How someone could kill twice and walk free for decades while the people left behind carried the weight. Cole found me like that, staring at nothing, thinking about everything. "You okay?" he asked. "Define okay." He sat, didn't push, just waited until I was ready to talk. "James is gone. My grandfather's murder can't be prosecuted because the statute of limitations ran out decades ago. My grandmother's murder might not stick because the evidence is circumstantial. And I'm sitting here with a head injury wondering what the point of any of this was." "The point," Cole said, "is that you're alive. You survived. And James has to spend the rest of his life running. That's not justice." "No, but it's something." We sat in silence for a while. Then Cole said something that surprised me. "I talked to my dad about Thomas, about your father." "What did he say?" "That Thomas was the best man he ever knew. That he was brilliant with metal but terrible with people. That he fell in love with your mother the first time he saw her and never looked at another woman." He paused. "My dad said Thomas knew he was dying. Car accident wasn't an accident. Brake line was cut. Thomas had made enemies, people who wanted what he knew, the Damascus technique. He was going to the police the day he died." "Someone killed him too." "Dad thinks so, but he was 20 years old at the time. Nobody listened to him. Case was closed as mechanical failure." I thought about that. 3 generations of Daltons, 3 murders that looked like accidents. James had killed Thomas, my grandfather. Someone had killed Thomas, my father. James had killed Ruth. How many more had there been? How many deaths disguised as misfortune? Cole's hand found mine. "Your grandmother spent 50 years protecting you from this, building something clean and good to give you. Don't let James poison that." "I'm not, but I'm also not going to pretend it doesn't matter." "It matters, but so does what you do next." The hospital released me on the 4th day with instructions to avoid strenuous activity for 2 weeks. No heavy lifting, no vigorous exercise, definitely no blacksmithing. I lasted 6 hours before I was back in the forge. Wade found me heating steel, moving carefully, trying to work around the headaches that came in waves. "You're supposed to be resting," he said. "I'll rest when I'm dead. Right now I have work to do." I've been thinking about the Damascus blade, the journeyman piece I needed to create. Marcus had mentioned it was tradition. A test. Create a blade to master standard within 6 months or the forge goes to the next worthy smith. I'd been here 5 weeks, had 4 months and 3 weeks left. Plenty of time except I'd barely managed a simple 32-layer billet. A true Damascus blade required at least 256 layers, preferably 512. Perfect pattern, perfect hardness, perfect edge retention. And now I had a concussion and doctor's orders not to swing a hammer. Wade watched me work for a few minutes. Then he said, "You're going to hurt yourself." Probably. Ruth wouldn't want that. Ruth left me this forge knowing exactly what it would cost to keep it. Pain is part of the price. I heated the steel to yellow, brought it to the anvil, raised the hammer. The motion sent a spike of pain through my skull. I ignored it, brought the hammer down. The impact rang through the forge and through my head like a bell. I worked for 2 hours before the headache got so bad I couldn't see straight. Managed 3 folds, 64 layers, progress. Marcus came by that evening, took one look at me and shook his head. "You look like hell. Feel worse." He examined my work. The 64-layer billet sitting on the workbench, picked it up, studied it in the fading light. "This is good work, better than it should be for someone with a concussion. Had a good teacher." He set it down carefully. "I got the test results back from my rheumatologist. The arthritis is progressing faster than they thought. I have maybe 2 years before I can't work metal at all, maybe less." "I'm sorry." "Don't be. 2 years is enough time to teach you everything I know, if you can survive that long without killing yourself." He pulled a piece of paper from his pocket, unfolded it. It was a design, a Damascus blade, but not just any blade. This one was complex. Multiple pattern types layered together, something called a ladder pattern combined with a twist pattern. "This is what I'm making for my final masterwork," he said. "Before my hands give out completely, I want you to make one too. We'll work on them together, compare techniques, push each other." "You want to compete?" "I want to collaborate. Competition is what destroyed Thomas and James, what ruined Ruth and me for 20 years. I'm done with that. Time to try something different." We shook on it. A pact between 2 smiths who'd both been damaged by the same family legacy, both trying to build something better from the ruins. Over the next week, Cole started spending more time at the ranch. He'd show up in the mornings with coffee and breakfast sandwiches, stay through the day, help with repairs I couldn't do with my head still healing, fix the porch railing, replace rotted boards, patch holes in the barn roof. We didn't talk much while we worked. Didn't need to. There was something comfortable about the silence, about working alongside someone who didn't require constant conversation. One afternoon, we were replacing fence posts in the north pasture when he said something that had clearly been building for days. "I need to tell you something about the mineral rights." I'd been avoiding thinking about that folder he'd given me. The one with the real offer, the access agreement that could make me wealthy if the geological surveys were right. "My company knows we're related now," he continued. "I had to disclose it. They're pulling me off the negotiation, sending someone else to deal with you." "Is that bad?" "Depends on who they send. If it's Martinez, he's fair. If it's Kellerman, he'll try to bury you in legal language and lowball you while pretending he's doing you a favor." "What should I do?" "Get your own lawyer, someone who understands mineral rights. Don't sign anything until you've had an independent geologist verify the surveys, and don't let them pressure you with deadlines." He drove another post into the ground. The muscles in his shoulders moved under his shirt. I'd noticed he was strong, Noticed a lot of things about him over the past week. Why are you helping me? I asked. Your company isn't going to like it. Probably not, but they're not family, you are. Third cousins barely counts. He looked at me directly. It counts to me. Thomas was my uncle, your father. That makes you the closest thing to a sibling I've got, and I don't let family get taken advantage of. Something warm moved through my chest. I'd spent 21 years without family. Now I had Wade and June, Marcus, and Cole. It didn't erase the loneliness of the past, but it made the present feel different. That night I worked late in the forge. The concussion headaches were getting better. I could work for longer stretches without the pain becoming unbearable. I was on attempt number 11 for the Damascus blade. 512 layers this time, the real test. The process took 8 hours, heat and fold and heat and fold. 9 times, each fold requiring perfect temperature control, perfect hammer technique, perfect timing. Around midnight, I achieved what I'd been working toward. A billet with 512 layers, clean welds, no delamination, the pattern visible even before etching. I forged it into a blade shape, rough, unfinished, but the basic form was there, 10 inches long, slight curve, tang for a handle. Then came the critical part, heat treatment. This was where most attempts failed. Get the temperature wrong, the blade warps or cracks. Quench it wrong, it shatters. Temper it wrong, it's too soft or too brittle. I heated the blade to precise temperature, 1500 degrees Fahrenheit. The color told me, cherry red, not orange, not yellow, cherry red. Quenched it in oil, the blade hissed, steam rose, I watched for warping, checked the straightness against a known straight edge. Perfect. Tempered it in the forge at 400 degrees for 2 hours. This relieved internal stress, made the steel tough instead of brittle. When it cooled, I held a blade that would cut and hold an edge and flex without breaking. The pattern was invisible until I etched it in acid, but I knew it was there. 512 layers of history and technique and family legacy folded into steel. Marcus came by the next morning. I showed him the blade. He examined it with the critical eye of someone who'd spent 40 years judging metalwork. This is journeyman quality, he said. This would pass any test I know. It's not done. Still needs grinding, sharpening, final polish. The hard part's done. Everything else is finishing work. He set it down gently. I have something to show you. He went to his truck and returned carrying a wooden box, opened it to reveal his own Damascus blade. Finished, polished, the pattern etched and clear, layers flowing like water frozen in steel. It was the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen. Took me 30 tries, he said. Started 6 months ago. This is attempt 31. I finally got it right. We stood side by side in the forge. 2 smiths, 2 blades, 2 generations of damage trying to heal. Your grandmother would be proud, he said. She'd probably find something to criticize. He smiled, probably, but she'd be proud first. Sarah Chen showed up at the ranch on a Tuesday afternoon. I'd met her once before. The county assessor who'd found all those violations. The woman Wade suspected was working with Cole's company to pressure me into selling. She parked near the house but didn't get out right away. Just sat in her car like she was building courage. Finally, she emerged carrying a folder. Morgan, can we talk? About what? About Ruth and about my brother. Your brother. She sat on the porch steps, gestured for me to join her. I did warily. My half-brother, she clarified. Marcus Webb. Same father, different mothers. He doesn't know about me. I processed that. Marcus had a half-sister, Sarah Chen, the woman who tried to condemn my forge. Why are you telling me this? Because I owe you an explanation and an apology. She opened the folder. Inside were documents, property records, financial statements, letters. I've been helping Marcus behind the scenes for 20 years. He doesn't know. After I found out we were related, I felt guilty. Our father abandoned him and his mother, died 10 years ago without ever acknowledging Marcus existed. I thought I could make up for that by helping him succeed. By sabotaging me. By trying to pressure you into selling the forge to him. Yes, the violations I cited were real, but I pushed for immediate remediation knowing you couldn't afford it, thought you'd sell to Marcus at a discount, thought I was helping family. And now I've listened to the tape Ruth left for Marcus, heard her explain what our father did, how James Dalton killed Thomas Dalton, how Ruth spent 40 years protecting everyone from that truth. She looked at me directly. I was wrong. This forge isn't something to be bought and sold and fought over. It's a legacy. Ruth wanted you and Marcus to share it, to work together, and I nearly destroyed that because I was trying to fix guilt that wasn't mine to fix. Does Marcus know you're his sister? No, I don't know how to tell him. Don't know if I should. You should. He deserves to know he has family. Real family. Not just the ghost of a father who killed his uncle. She nodded slowly. Will you be there when I tell him? I don't think I can do it alone. We arranged to meet at Marcus's forge that evening. The three of us. Sarah brought documentation, birth certificates, letters from her mother explaining the relationship, photos of James Dalton with both women, evidence of a man who'd left damage across 2 families. Marcus listened to Sarah's explanation without interrupting, read the documents, studied the photos. His face didn't show much, but his hands gripped the workbench hard enough to make the wood creak. When Sarah finished, he was quiet for a long time. Then he said 4 words. I have a sister. Half-sister, but yes. Do you shoe horses? The question caught her off guard. What? Do you know anything about blacksmithing, metalwork, the craft? No, I'm a county assessor. I work with paperwork. Then you need to learn. Family works together. That's what Morgan taught me. So if you're family, you work. Sarah's eyes filled with tears. I don't know anything about forges. Neither did Morgan when she started. Neither did I 40 years ago. You'll learn. They hugged then, awkward at first. 2 people who'd spent years orbiting each other without knowing they were connected, but it was a start. The journeyman test was set for 6 weeks from that day. Marcus and I had both completed blades that met technical requirements, but tradition demanded a formal evaluation. 3 master smiths from across Wyoming would judge the work, test the blades for hardness, sharpness, edge retention, pattern quality. Marcus and I worked side by side for those 6 weeks, refining our techniques, teaching each other tricks we'd learned. He showed me how to create a Hammond line, the temper line that Japanese smiths use. I showed him modern grinding techniques that his arthritic hands could manage better than traditional methods. Cole watched sometimes, learning, asking questions. He had no talent for metalwork, but he appreciated the craft, understood what it meant to create something permanent. One evening, he asked me something that had clearly been on his mind. What are we doing here? I looked up from the blade I was grinding. What do you mean? This us. Are we just cousins helping each other, or is this something else? I set down the grinder, met his eyes. I don't know, is it something else? I think it could be, if you want it to be. I thought about that, about spending my whole life avoiding connections because they always ended badly, about my grandmother spending 50 years alone because she'd lost the person she loved. I don't want to be alone anymore, I said. Neither do I. He kissed me then, gentle, careful, like he was afraid I'd break. I kissed him back, not gentle, not careful, like I was claiming something I'd spent too long denying myself. We're third cousins, I said when we broke apart. Is that weird? Legal in all 50 states, I checked. You checked. I've been thinking about this for a while. How long? Since you hit James Dalton with that hammer. You were terrifying, it was attractive. I laughed, first real laugh I'd had in weeks, felt good. The testing day arrived with spring starting to show itself in Wyoming. The snow had mostly melted. New grass was coming up green. The air still had bite, but you could feel warmth underneath. The three master smiths arrived at noon. Old men, all of them, 70s and 80s. They'd spent their lives working metal, could read a blade the way some people read books. They examined Marcus's blade first, tested the hardness with a file. The file skated across the surface without biting, hard enough. They cut rope with it. 50 clean cuts without dulling. They flexed it. The blade bent and returned straight, no permanent deformation. They etched a small section with acid to verify the pattern went all the way through, not just surface decoration. The pattern was there, consistent, beautiful. Score, 94 out of 100. Exceptional work for a smith with arthritis limiting his abilities. Then they tested mine. Same tests, hardness, sharpness, flexibility, pattern verification. My blade was harder without being brittle, held an edge through 100 cuts instead of 50. The pattern was more complex than Marcus's, 512 layers against his 256. But I'd made one mistake, a small asymmetry in the handle from compensating for my concussion headaches while forging. The blade was perfect. The handle was slightly off-center. Score, 97 out of 100. The lead judge, a man named William Cross who'd been smithing for 60 years, looked at both of us. You've both passed journeyman standard. Both of you could hang a shingle and sell your work with pride. But there's something you should know before we announce the results. He pulled an envelope from his jacket, sealed with wax. Ruth Dalton sent this to me 6 months before she died, with instructions to open it only if both Marcus Webb and Morgan Tate completed the journeyman test. Both of us, Marcus said. Both of you, she was very specific. William broke the seal, read the letter silently, then he read it aloud. To whom it may concern. If you're reading this, Marcus and Morgan have both completed journeyman blades. That means my plan worked. The test was never about determining who gets the forge. It was about proving both deserve to be smiths, about forcing them to work together instead of competing, about healing damage I caused by choosing fear over trust. Marcus Webb earned this forge through 20 years of dedication and skill. Morgan Tate inherited it through blood and law. Neither claim is more valid than the other. So I'm leaving it to both of them. Equal partners, equal ownership. The forge stays in operation only if they work together. If either refuses, the property goes to the State Historical Society and becomes a museum. You can't work together if you're competing for the same prize, but you can work together if you're building something neither could build alone. Marcus and Morgan, you're both journeymen now. Build something worthy of the craft. Build something worthy of the Dalton name. Build something together. Signed, Ruth Dalton. The forge was silent except for the wind outside and the cooling tick of metal. Marcus looked at me. I looked at him. Partners, he said. I thought about my grandmother, about her 50 years of solitude, about the damage caused by competition and secrets and fear. Partners, I agreed. We shook hands while the three judges witnessed, while Wade and June and Cole and Sarah watched, while the ghosts of Thomas Dalton and Thomas Brennan and Ruth herself looked on. The forge had room for two smiths, had always had room. We just needed to learn how to share it. That night we threw a party in the forge building. Nothing fancy, just the community that had shown up to help, the people who'd rewired the electrical, the ones who'd built storage systems, the families my grandmother had helped over 50 years, and the new family I was building, Marcus and Sarah, Cole, Wade and June. Someone brought a guitar, someone else brought whiskey. We stood around the forge, still warm from the day's work, and told stories about Ruth, about her perfectionism, her stubbornness, her secret generosity, her terrible sense of humor. Marcus told about the time she'd made him redo a single weld 17 times because it wasn't perfect. Wade told about the time she'd fixed his truck in the middle of winter and refused payment. June told about the furniture Ruth had made for their daughter's wedding, claiming she'd had extra wood and needed to use it up. Cole told about his Uncle Thomas, about the man who'd been my father, about his brilliance and his kindness and his death that nobody had questioned until it was too late. And I told about the 318 letters, about learning I'd been loved all along by someone I'd never met, about coming to Wyoming with nothing and finding everything. The party went late. People drifted home one by one, until it was just Marcus and Cole and me sitting in the forge as the last coals died in the hearth. "What happens now?" I asked. Marcus flexed his hands, studied the swelling in his knuckles. "Now I teach you everything I know before these hands give out completely, and you teach the next generation, and the forge stays alive." "What about you?" I asked Cole. "I quit my job today," he said. "Told the company I couldn't represent them in negotiations with family. They weren't happy." "What will you do?" He looked around the forge. "This building could use a business manager, someone to handle clients and contracts and marketing while you two focus on the metalwork. I'm not much good with a hammer, but I'm decent with numbers." "You want to work here?" "I want to build something that matters. This matters." The three of us, a partnership nobody would have predicted 6 weeks ago, the damaged apprentice with arthritic hands, the orphan girl with a concussion and a legacy, the land developer who chose family over profit. We'd all been broken by the same legacy. Now we were building something new from the pieces. Outside, the Wyoming night was clear and cold, stars hard and bright, the kind of sky that makes you feel small and significant at the same time. Small because the universe is vast, significant because you're here to see it. I walked Cole to his truck. He pulled me close, kissed me under those stars. "You know this is crazy, right?" he said. "Giving up a 6-figure salary to work at a forge that barely breaks even." "Completely crazy." "Good, I've been too practical for too long. Time to try something different." I watched him drive away, his taillights disappearing down the gravel road. Then I went back to the forge. Marcus was still there, sitting at the workbench, holding his Damascus blade. "You okay?" I asked. He nodded, just thinking about all the years I wasted being angry at Ruth, all the time I could have had learning from her if we'd both been less stubborn. "You have time now to teach, to pass it on." He set down the blade, looked at me. "When my hands give out, you'll be the one carrying this forward. You and whoever you teach. That's a responsibility." "I know." "You ready for it?" I thought about that, about the weight of legacy, about the craft that had been passed down through 4 generations, about my grandmother who'd spent 50 years building something beautiful and permanent, about my grandfather and my father, both killed for the knowledge they carried. "I'm not ready," I said, "but I will be." Marcus smiled. "That's the right answer. The day you think you're ready is the day you stop learning." He stood, stretched, his spine cracked like kindling. "Go get some sleep. Tomorrow we start on your first commission. Real client, real deadline, real pressure." "What commission?" "I may have told the judges you'd make them each a Damascus knife. They're expecting delivery in 3 months." "I don't know if I can make 3 blades that perfect in 3 months." "Then you better start learning faster." He left me alone in the forge. I stood there surrounded by tools and anvils and the smell of coal smoke and steel. This was mine now, not just property, not just inheritance. Mine because I'd earned it, because I'd bled for it, because I'd learned to read the iron and create something permanent from something raw. On the workbench sat my journeyman blade, 97 out of 100, not perfect, but good. Better than I'd thought possible 6 weeks ago. I picked it up, felt the balance, the weight, the edge that could still cut cleanly after 100 rope tests. This was proof, evidence that I could do this, that I belonged here. I hung it on the wall next to Marcus's blade. 2 journeymen, 2 partners, 2 people who'd been damaged by the same family legacy and chosen to heal it together. The forge was dark except for the dying embers in the hearth. I banked the fire, made sure everything was secure, locked the door behind me. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new work, new opportunities to fail or succeed. But tonight, I'd passed a test I'd spent 6 weeks preparing for and 21 years not knowing I'd need. I walked back to the house under stars that didn't care about blacksmithing or family legacies or anything human. They just burned, constant, permanent, like the work I was learning to create. Inside, I found the box of my grandmother's letters, pulled out the last one, the one dated 6 months before she died. "Soon you'll have proof that I loved you. Soon you'll have everything I have to give." She'd been right. I had the forge, the tools, the knowledge in 68 videos and 1 hollow anvil. I had Marcus teaching me, Wade and June caring for me, Sarah becoming family, Cole choosing me over career. I had community, legacy, purpose, roots. Everything she'd promised, everything I'd never thought I'd have. I folded the letter carefully, put it back in the box. Someday, maybe, I'd write letters of my own, to children or apprentices or whoever came after me, passing forward what had been passed to me. But that was future worry. Tonight, I just needed to sleep. Tomorrow, I had knives to forge and a partnership to build and a legacy to carry forward. The iron would be waiting, patient, honest, ready to teach me everything I still needed to learn. And I'd be ready to listen. 6 months passed before the federal marshals caught James Dalton. He'd made it all the way to Alaska, working under a false name at a remote mining operation. Someone recognized him from a wanted poster. By the time the marshals arrived, he'd already tried to run. They found him 3 miles into the wilderness with a broken leg from falling in terrain he didn't know well enough to navigate at night. Sheriff Harper called me with the news on a Tuesday afternoon. I was in the forge working on a commission for a rancher in Montana. Custom gate hardware. Nothing fancy, but honest work that paid honest money. "They got him," Harper said. "He's not going anywhere this time." The trial took another 4 months. Federal charges for interstate flight. Wyoming charges for 2 counts of first-degree murder. The evidence was overwhelming once James started talking. He wanted a deal, wanted to trade information for a reduced sentence. The prosecutors didn't need his cooperation, but they let him talk anyway, recorded every word. He confessed to killing Thomas in 1983 over the Damascus technique, confessed to killing Ruth when she threatened to expose him, even confessed to sabotaging Thomas Brennan's car in 1991. My father, James, had been there, had cut the brake lines because Thomas was going to the police with evidence about the first murder. 3 murders over 50 years, all for a metalworking technique that was now being openly taught. All that death for a secret that had died the moment Marcus and I decided to share it. The jury took 2 hours to convict. The judge gave him life without parole. He was 78 years old. He'd die in prison. I attended the sentencing, sat in the courtroom next to Cole and Marcus and Wade, listened to the judge read the sentence, watched James Dalton's face as he realized he'd spend whatever time he had left in a cell. He looked at me as they led him away, tried to say something. The marshals kept him moving. I never found out what he wanted to say. Didn't matter. Nothing he could say would bring back the people he'd killed. Nothing would return the years my grandmother spent alone, or the childhood I'd spent unwanted, or the father I'd never known. Justice wasn't healing. It was just the end of one chapter. Outside the courthouse, Marcus put his hand on my shoulder. His hands were worse now. Some days he couldn't grip a hammer at all, but he could still teach, could still guide my hands as I worked, could still pass on knowledge before it was too late. "It's over," he said. "Is it?" He understood what I meant. The trial was over. James would die in prison. But the damage he'd caused would ripple forward for generations. You don't kill 3 people and have it just end with a verdict. "The healing's not over," Marcus said, "but the running is. James spent 50 years running from what he did. We don't have to run, we get to build." The forge had become something my grandmother probably wouldn't recognize. Not in the tools or the building. Those were the same, but in the energy, the purpose. Where Ruth had worked alone for 50 years, now there were 3 of us. 4 when Sarah came by after work to learn basic techniques. Cole had transformed the business side, created a website showcasing our work, established relationships with galleries and collectors, set up a commission system that kept us booked 6 months out. He'd found a market for high-end Damascus pieces that I hadn't known existed, chefs who wanted custom kitchen knives, hunters who paid thousands for folders with patterns that looked like flowing water, collectors who bought purely for the art. We were making money, real money, enough that I could pay property taxes without anxiety, enough to upgrade equipment, enough to think about the future instead of just surviving the present. But the money wasn't the point. The work was the point, the creation, the knowledge passing from Marcus's failing hands to mine and eventually to whoever came after me. Spring turned to summer. The Wyoming heat was different from the forge heat, drier, cleaner, the kind of heat that made you appreciate shade and cold water and the occasional afternoon when clouds built over the mountains and rain fell hard enough to cool things down for an hour. Marcus's arthritis was winning. Some mornings he'd arrive at the forge and I could see it in his face before he said anything. The pain, the frustration, the knowledge that his body was betraying the skill his mind still held. On the bad days, he'd sit and I'd work. He'd call out corrections, guide me through techniques, tell me stories about the pieces he'd made over 40 years, the gate for the governor's mansion, the custom hardware for a cathedral in Cheyenne, the wedding gift for a couple who'd commissioned matching Damascus rings. On the good days, we'd work side by side, him moving slower, me learning to anticipate what he needed before he had to ask, a rhythm developing between us, teacher and student, partner and partner, family. One good day, he taught me his signature technique, a way of creating a pattern called a raindrop that required folding the steel in a specific sequence, then drilling small holes before the final forge welding. The holes created circular patterns in the finished blade that looked like rain hitting water. It took me 17 tries to get it right. Each failure taught me something: temperature control, drill placement, the exact timing of when to fold and when to weld. By attempt 18, I'd created a pattern that Marcus nodded at. That's it, that's the raindrop. You can't teach that from a book, you have to feel it. Why is it so important? Because it's mine. I developed it over 10 years. It's the one thing I created that's wholly original, and now it's yours too. He was giving me more than technique. He was giving me legacy. His legacy. The thing he'd created from all those years of working alone and bitter and convinced he wasn't good enough. Thank you, I said. Don't thank me, just pass it on. Teach someone else someday. That's how we defeat time, not by living forever, by making sure what we learn doesn't die with us. Cole and I had fallen into a pattern too. He'd work the business side during the day, handle calls and emails and client meetings. Then in the evening, he'd come to the forge and we'd work together, not on commissions, on personal projects, things we made just because we wanted to make them. He was getting better with the hammer, would never be a master smith, but he could forge basic shapes now, could make simple tools, could understand what I was doing well enough to appreciate the difficulty. One evening, we were working on a gate for the ranch entrance, something to replace the weathered wooden sign that had been there since 1954. Cole was heating steel while I assembled the frame. The summer sun was low, throwing golden light through the forge windows. "I've been thinking," he said, about this, us, what we're building here." He set down his tongs, came over to where I was working, took my hands in his. They were calloused now, working hands, different from the soft office hands he'd had 6 months ago. "I want to build a life with you," he said, "not someday. Now. I want to wake up here and work here and grow old here. I want whatever comes next to be something we face together." Is this a proposal? It's a statement of intent. The proposal comes later, when I've made you something worthy of the question. But I wanted you to know where I'm headed, in case you're headed somewhere different. I'm headed here to this forge, to this life, to you. Then we're headed the same direction. He kissed me there in the forge with the sun setting and the steel cooling and the future spreading out like the Wyoming landscape. Vast, uncertain, beautiful. The first apprentice arrived in late summer. Her name was Jade Martinez, 17 years old, emancipated from the foster system after aging out at 16. She'd heard about the forge from a social worker who knew my story. Showed up one afternoon with a backpack and an expression I recognized immediately. Defensive, angry, expecting rejection because rejection was all she'd ever known. "I can work," she said. "I'm strong. I'm not afraid of hard work. I just need somewhere to learn, somewhere to be." "Why blacksmithing?" "Because nobody can take it away from me. I can't get evicted from knowing how to make things. Can't get moved to a different home and lose my skills. Whatever I learn, it's mine. Forever." I understood that. The need for something permanent in a life that had been nothing but temporary. "You'll work harder than you've ever worked," I told her. "Your hands will bleed. Your back will hurt. You'll want to quit every single day for the first month. But if you stick with it, you'll make something that outlasts all of us." "When do I start?" "Now." I handed her safety glasses and a leather apron 3 sizes too big, showed her how to light the forge, how to pump the bellows, how to recognize the right color of heat, the same lessons my grandmother had taught me through 68 videos, the same lessons Marcus had reinforced through patient demonstration. Jade's first project was an S-hook, the same first project everyone made. She failed 6 times before creating something recognizable, threw her hammer in frustration after attempt 4, tried to quit after attempt 5, but she came back for attempt 6 and 7. On attempt 8, she made a hook that would hold weight and look decent doing it. She held it up like it was gold. "I made this." "You did." Her eyes filled with tears. "I've never made anything before, nothing that mattered." "This matters." She hung that S-hook on the wall next to mine and my grandmother's. 3 generations of first attempts. 3 people who'd started with nothing and built something from fire and will. Over the next months, Jade became part of the forge, part of the family we were building. She lived in the small apartment above the workshop that we'd converted from storage space, worked 6 days a week, studied Marcus's techniques and my techniques and developed some of her own. She was talented, more talented than I'd been at her age. Her hands understood metal in a way that couldn't be taught, only refined. Marcus saw it too, started teaching her things he hadn't taught me yet, advanced techniques, subtle tricks he'd learned over 40 years. He knew his time was limited, wanted to pass on everything before his hands gave out completely. One evening, the 3 of us were working late when Marcus's right hand seized up completely. The hammer fell from his grip, clattered on the concrete floor. He stood there looking at his hand, trying to open the fingers. They wouldn't respond. "I think that's it," he said quietly. "I think I just forged my last piece." We helped him to a chair. Sarah arrived minutes later. She'd become attuned to his needs. Could tell when the pain was bad even when he tried to hide it. She took him home. Jade and I stayed in the forge, finished the piece he'd been working on, a simple holdfast, tool for securing work to a bench, nothing fancy, but the last thing Marcus Webb would ever forge. I wrapped it carefully, labeled it, dated it, put it in the case where we kept significant pieces, the last work of a master. The next day Marcus came back, not to forge, just to sit, to watch, to teach with words instead of demonstration. "This is how it ends," he said, "not with a bang, just with hands that won't grip anymore, body giving out while the mind is still sharp. It's not ending, it's changing." Same thing sometimes. But he kept coming, every day, sat in his chair and guided Jade and me through increasingly complex projects. His voice became the hammer when his hands couldn't be. His knowledge flowed through us, made our hands steadier, our judgment clearer, our work better. Fall came. The aspens turned gold on the mountains. The air got that particular crispness that Wyoming does better than anywhere. Cold enough to remind you winter was coming, but still warm enough to work comfortably. Cole and I were married in October. Small ceremony in the forge, just family. Wade and June, Marcus and Sarah, Jade, a few friends from town. The minister was a man who'd known my grandmother. He spoke about legacy and building and creating something permanent from temporary materials. Cole had made the rings himself, simple bands forged from steel, not Damascus, just honest steel shaped into circles. They weren't perfect. One was slightly thicker than the other. The surface showed hammer marks where he'd worked the metal. They were the most beautiful things I'd ever seen. We took no honeymoon, had too much work, too many commissions, too many students to teach. The forge couldn't stop just because we wanted to celebrate. But every evening we'd walk to the house together, make dinner, sit on the porch and watch the sun set behind the Wind River Range, talk about the day, plan for tomorrow, build a life one conversation at a time. One night, Cole asked me something that had clearly been building. "Do you ever regret it, choosing this instead of taking the money and leaving?" I thought about that, about the $275,000 offer I'd refused, about the mineral rights I could have sold for millions, about the easy path I'd rejected in favor of the hard one. Never, this is where I'm supposed to be. Even with everything that happened, James, the attacks, the concussion. Especially because of that, easy things don't teach you who you are, hard things do. He took my hand. Even in the darkness I could feel the calluses, the marks of work, the evidence of building. I used to think success meant money, he said. Big house, nice car, status. Now I think success is being able to sleep at night knowing you didn't betray who you're supposed to be. We're successful then. Yeah, we are. Winter came hard that year. Snow in November. Temperatures that dropped below zero and stayed there for weeks. The forge became the warmest place on the ranch. We'd work through the days and into the evenings, the fire providing heat that the house struggled to match. Jade thrived in winter, said she liked the contrast. The frozen world outside and the heat of creation inside. She was working on her journeyman piece, a Damascus blade more ambitious than mine had been. She wanted to create something that would make Marcus proud before his time ran out. But winter brought challenges she hadn't anticipated. The cold made the steel harder to work. Temperature control became critical, and the pressure she put on herself began to show. Her first attempt at the journeyman blade failed catastrophically. She'd been working for 3 weeks, building up a billet with 768 layers. The pattern was ambitious, something she called feathers flowing down the steel. Marcus had never seen anyone attempt it. But when she heat-treated the blade, something went wrong. The steel warped, twisted during the quench. 3 weeks of work ruined in 30 seconds. She stood holding the ruined blade, her whole body trembling. Then she threw it across the forge. It hit the wall with a clang that rang through the building. "I can't do this," she said. Her voice was raw. "I'm not good enough. I'll never be good enough." Marcus was in his chair, watching. He'd seen this before. The moment when talent meets limitation and the student has to decide whether to quit or grow. "You're right," he said quietly. Jade looked at him, shocked. "You're not good enough. Not yet. That blade was too ambitious for your current skill level. You tried to run before you could walk." "Then what's the point? If I'm not good enough, why keep trying?" "Because not good enough today doesn't mean not good enough tomorrow. I've ruined more pieces than you've made. Morgan's thrown away more steel than you've touched. Failure is how you learn where the edges are." Jade was crying now. Angry tears, frustrated tears, the kind that come when you've put everything into something and watched it fail. "Start over," Marcus said. "Same design, but build it slower. Take 6 weeks instead of 3. Let the steel teach you what it needs." "I don't want to start over. I want it to work." "Then you're in the wrong craft. Iron doesn't care what you want. It only cares what you're willing to learn." Jade picked up the ruined blade, looked at it for a long time. Then she carried it to the case where we kept significant pieces. "I'm keeping this," she said, "to remember." "Remember what?" "That I tried something hard, that I failed, that I'm going to try again." Marcus smiled. "Now you're learning." Her second attempt took 7 weeks. She worked slower, more carefully, checked every fold, verified every weld. Heat treated the blade with obsessive precision. This time when she quenched it, the blade came out straight. The pattern was there. 768 layers creating detail that looked like feathers frozen in steel. Marcus examined it with the critical eye of someone who'd spent 40 years judging metalwork. "This is better than anything I made at your age," he said. "This is better than most masters make in a lifetime." Jade didn't throw this blade. She held it carefully, reverently, like she understood what it represented, not just skill, but persistence, the willingness to fail and start over. Marcus's health was declining faster now. The arthritis had spread to his lungs. Some days he couldn't come to the forge at all. Sarah would bring updates. He was sleeping more, eating less, fading in that slow way that lets you prepare but never quite accept. On the days he did come, he'd sit wrapped in blankets near the forge, soaking up heat that didn't help the cold inside him. But he'd still teach, still correct technique, still tell stories about the decades he'd spent working metal. One afternoon in December, with snow falling outside and the forge fire burning bright, Marcus told us about the best piece he'd ever made. It was a gate for a widow who'd lost her husband in a mining accident. She wanted something to remember him by, something strong that would last. I worked on it for 3 months, forged every piece by hand, created a pattern in the metalwork that told their story, a miner going into darkness and coming back to light. When I installed it, she cried, said it was like having him back, not really, but having something that honored who he'd been. He was quiet for a moment, hands trembling in his lap. That's what this craft is for, not making money, not winning competitions, making things that help people remember, help them feel, help them know they're connected to something larger than themselves. That's what you taught us, I said. No, Ruth taught me that. I was too angry to hear it at the time, but it was there in everything she made. Every piece was a story. Every hammer strike was a word. She was writing in metal because words on paper weren't permanent enough. What story are we writing? Jade asked. Marcus smiled. That's for whoever comes after you to read. We just do the writing. We don't get to know how it ends. Marcus Webb died on a Wednesday in January, peacefully, in his sleep. Sarah called me at dawn with the news. I could hear in her voice that she'd been crying all night. He wanted you to have his tools, she said, all of them, his hammers, his tongs, everything he used for 40 years. He said they should keep working even if he couldn't. The funeral was on Saturday. Half the county showed up. Ranchers whose horses he'd shod, families who'd commissioned his work, students he'd taught over the decades, people whose lives he'd touched through metal and fire and patient instruction. Wade spoke about Marcus's dedication. Sarah spoke about discovering she had a brother and losing him too soon. I spoke about partnership and redemption and second chances. We buried him in the small cemetery outside Riverton, next to his mother, under a sky so blue it hurt to look at. The wind came down from the mountains, cold and constant, Wyoming wind, the kind that reminds you that beauty and harshness aren't opposites. I placed one of his Damascus blades in the coffin with him, the last complete piece he'd made before his hands failed. Sarah placed their father's photograph, torn in half, James's side removed, only the part that was Marcus preserved. Jade placed her first successful journeyman blade, the one she'd made after the failure, the one that proved she could start over and succeed. Not the first attempt, she told me later, the second one, because Marcus taught me that failure isn't the end, it's just information. Back at the forge, we kept working. That's what Marcus would have wanted. The forge doesn't stop because someone dies. The iron doesn't care about grief. It only cares whether you're paying attention. Jade threw herself into teaching the newer apprentices with intensity that came from understanding loss. She'd lost Marcus, but she still had his knowledge, and she was determined to pass it forward. The testing for her journeyman certification was scheduled for April. The same 3 master smiths, William Cross and 2 others who'd spent their lives working metal. They tested Jade's blade with the same rigor they'd used on ours. Hardness, sharpness, flexibility, pattern quality. She stood and watched with her arms crossed, not defensive now, just focused. She knew the blade was good, knew she'd earned this. The blade passed every test. The pattern was exceptional. 768 layers creating detail that looked like feathers frozen in steel. The edge held through 150 cuts. The steel flexed and returned true. Score 98 out of 100, higher than mine, higher than Marcus's, one of the highest scores William Cross had ever given. "You're a journeyman," he told Jade, "and if you keep working, you'll be a master before you're 30. She didn't cry this time, just nodded, accepted it as fact. This skinny 17-year-old who'd shown up with nothing and learned to create something permanent, who'd gone from foster care to forgemaster in 9 months through work and will and the guidance of people who'd chosen to care. I hugged her. Cole hugged her. Sarah hugged her. We celebrated in the forge where Marcus had taught her, where his spirit still lived in the techniques we used and the standards we maintained and the knowledge we passed forward. That night I hung Jade's blade on the wall next to Marcus's and mine. 3 generations, 3 journeymen, 3 people who'd been broken by the system and rebuilt by the craft. 5 years later, the forge had grown into something my grandmother couldn't have imagined, not bigger in size. We'd kept the original building, but bigger in impact. We had 6 apprentices now, 3 long-term, 3 short-term, all of them kids from the foster system, all of them learning that they could create something permanent even when everything else in their lives had been temporary. Jade was teaching them, 22 years old and already recognized as one of the finest young smiths in Wyoming. She developed her own techniques, created patterns no one had made before, had commissions booked 2 years out. And she was patient with the new students in ways that came from remembering her own struggles. When they failed, she'd show them her ruined first attempt, the blade that had warped during quenching, the one she kept in the display case as a reminder. "This is what failure looks like," she'd tell them, "and this is what you do with it. You learn, you start over, you get better." Cole and I had a daughter, 2 years old, Margaret Caroline, Maggie for short, named after Ruth and Rebecca, my grandmother and my mother. She'd toddle into the forge and play with metal scraps while we worked. Would grab tongs twice her size and pretend to work the anvil, already showing interest in the craft that had shaped her family for 5 generations. The mineral rights deal had finally gone through. Cole had negotiated it himself after leaving the land development company. We retained full ownership of the surface. The drilling company got access to extract natural gas. We got 15% royalties. The first check had been enough to fund the apprentice program for 5 years, to upgrade equipment, to ensure the forge would survive another generation. But we still worked, still took commissions, still taught, because the money wasn't the point. The money just meant we could focus on what mattered, creating, teaching, passing forward. Sarah had become the business manager, handled bookkeeping and client relations and all the administrative work that kept a forge running. She'd never learned to work metal herself. Her arthritis had come on early, Marcus's genetic legacy, but she contributed in other ways, kept the forge solvent, kept us organized, kept Marcus's memory alive. Wade and June were slowing down, both in their 70s now, but they still came by regularly, checked on us, brought food, told stories about Ruth and Thomas and the old days when the forge was just one woman working alone and stubborn and brilliant. On the 5th anniversary of Ruth's death, I did something I'd been planning for a year. I forged a memorial, not a plaque or a statue, a gate, the most elaborate piece I'd ever attempted, 7 feet tall, Damascus panels showing the story of 5 generations of Smiths, Thomas Dalton and his brother, Ruth learning the craft, Thomas Brennan working beside her, Rebecca leaving and trying to come home, me arriving, Marcus teaching, Jade learning, and blank panels at the end. Space for whoever came next. The pattern in the Damascus told the story without words, darkness and light, conflict and resolution, damage and healing. The metal remembered everything we'd put into it, every hammer strike, every fold, every moment of heat and force and transformation. I installed it at the entrance to the ranch, where the old wooden sign had been. This gate would outlast all of us, would stand for 100 years, would tell our story to people who'd never known us. The dedication was simple, just family, just the people who understood what the gate meant. We stood in front of it as the sun set, Wyoming light turning everything gold. Wade spoke first, talked about Ruth's stubbornness and generosity, about her fear and her courage, about the legacy she'd built one hammer strike at a time. Sarah spoke about Marcus, about the brother she'd found too late and lost too soon, about redemption and second chances and the family we choose. Jade spoke about being unwanted and finding home, about learning that permanence was possible, about creating things that would outlast the pain, about failure teaching you as much as success. Cole spoke about Thomas Brennan, the uncle he'd never known but who'd given him a family he'd never expected, about love that crosses generations, about circles that close in unexpected ways. I spoke about iron, about how it's honest, how it doesn't lie, how it shows you every mistake and every success, how it teaches patience and precision and the value of starting over when things go wrong. We stood together as the light faded, 5 people connected by blood and choice and craft, 5 people who'd been damaged by the same legacy and chosen to heal it together, 5 people who'd learned that family isn't just who you're born to, it's who shows up, who teaches, who stays. Little Maggie ran through the gate, back and forth, laughing, too young to understand the story in the metal, but old enough to know this place was hers, that these people were hers, that she belonged. Someday I'd teach her, show her how to light the forge, how to heat steel, how to swing a hammer, how to create something permanent from something raw. I'd tell her about her great-great-grandmother Ruth who'd worked alone for 50 years and left a legacy that transformed loneliness into community. I'd tell her about Marcus who'd spent 20 years angry and bitter and found redemption through teaching, about Sarah who'd discovered family in the last place she expected, about Cole who'd chosen purpose over profit, about Jade who'd proven that being unwanted didn't mean being unworthy, and that failure was just the first step toward mastery. And I'd tell her about Thomas Brennan, her grandfather, the man who'd loved her great-grandmother and her grandmother and had died before meeting either of the daughters he'd created, the man whose hands lived on in mine and would live on in hers if she chose this craft. But that was future teaching. Tonight was just being present, watching my daughter play in the twilight, feeling Cole's hand in mine, listening to family tell stories about people who died but whose presence was still felt in every piece of metal we shaped. The forge behind us was dark, the fire banked for the night, but it would burn again tomorrow, and the day after, and the day after that, for as long as there were hands to work it and knowledge to pass forward and people willing to learn that creation is harder than destruction but infinitely more worthwhile. I thought about my grandmother's letter, the one that had come when I was 21 and lost, the one that had brought me to Wyoming with nothing but a duffel bag and a photograph and a heart that had forgotten how to hope. She'd promised me a foundation. She'd promised me roots. She'd promised me proof that I'd been loved even when I didn't know it. She'd given me all of that and more, given me a craft, a community, a family, a purpose, given me the tools to build a life that mattered. The gate would stand long after we were gone, would tell our story in Damascus and iron and patterns that flowed like water, would be the proof that we were here, that we worked, that we created, that we mattered. That's all legacy is, proof that we were here, that we built something, that we passed it forward. The iron remembers, every hammer strike, every fold, Every moment of heat and force and transformation. It remembers and it tells the story to anyone who learns to read it. I'd learned to read it, had learned that damage can be transformed, that broken things can be forged into something stronger, that heat and pressure and time can create beauty from raw materials. Had learned that I wasn't alone, had never been alone, that my grandmother had loved me from a distance for 14 years, that my mother had tried to come home, that my father had made me tools before I was born, that family was waiting if I was brave enough to claim it. The stars came out above Wyoming, cold and bright and permanent, the same stars my grandmother had seen, the same stars my daughter would see, connected across time by light that had traveled for years to reach us, connected across generations by knowledge and blood and choice. We walked back to the house together, all of us, family. The forge could wait until morning. The metal would still be there, the fire would burn again, the work would continue. But tonight was for rest, for being together, for knowing that we'd built something worth building, something permanent, something that would outlast us all. The iron would remember, and that was enough.